Chapter 752. Now, in the casino, under the vigilant and cautious gazes of many gamblers at the same table, Huaishur held the cards in his hand, raised his eyes disdainfully, and looked at his opponent, the flower arrangement on the bar counter behind him. "Brother, what cards does he have in his hand? Why are you panicking? It's just 2 jacks." The bouquet of plum blossoms that the flower master painstakingly made every day swayed twice excitedly. "A diamond and a heart. I can't beat you in seconds. Beat him, beat him. Thanks, brother. I'll water you later." "You're welcome." Huaishur retracted his gaze and smiled evilly. He raised his hand and threw out 2 crystal chips. "I'll raise 20 million. In the suffocating atmosphere, someone finally couldn't stand the huge pressure and stood up. "I fold." Ignoring the chips he had bet on the table, he took his little capital and fled in a sorry state. "That's it." Amidst the sound of gasps, the god of gamblers, Huaishur, looked around and smiled disdainfully. How terrifying! The surrounding gazes became more and more respectful and fearful, but unfortunately they didn't have the guts to shout, "This guy must not be left alive." This was probably the most common saying of pretending to be a pig to eat a tiger. In Doomsday, in order to numb his opponent, he actually didn't hesitate to lose 4 million before the game started. Everyone was deceived by his harmless appearance, but they didn't expect that it was all an act. He was scheming and scheming like the sea, as expected of the Huaishur group that rose from the inner circle in just half a month. It was really terrifying. "So, I've won again?" Huaishur lowered his head and looked at the chips in front of him that were about to drown him. It was unbelievable. In fact, until now, this fool still hadn't figured out the rules of 5-card stud, Texas, and blackjack. He had to rely on Chi, Wen's reminders and instructions, as well as the help of the stigmata. Otherwise, not to mention playing cards, he would have lost the game long ago. Until now, Huaishur still didn't understand what was going on. He didn't know why he won, and then he won repeatedly. Occasionally, he lost a little, but he immediately won back twice as much. Was it so good to reap without sowing? Huaishur himself was stunned. But even though he knew that these chips were just tokens for a short night and couldn't be exchanged for anything, he was still so excited that his face turned red. He couldn't wait to wave the chips and shout for more. Looking at the group of idiots around them, they didn't know how to use their brains at all. Winning was simply too important. Luck was on my side. I can win again. I can win until the end. Only I am the ruler of this place. Huaishur's face flushed with excitement as a strong sense of confidence and impulse surged in his mind. He feverishly stroked the small mountain of chips in front of him. But when he thought that he would have to give half of the money he earned to the black-hearted woman, his heart suddenly ached. Wait, why would my heart hurt? What's the difference between this unredeemable code and plastic? Huaishur was instantly alerted by the warning from the Book of Destiny. His smile froze on his face as he stood there in a daze. What was going on? Hurry up and start. Hey, hurry up. Are you stupid? Huaishur, get out of the way if you don't want to play. Don't make people wait too long. The gamblers who squeezed over and sat down couldn't wait to urge him. They glared at the dazed man. Even the dealer looked over in confusion. "Mr. Huaishur, can we start?" In the silence, Huaishur raised his head and looked at the faces that were filled with fanaticism and excitement. After a long time, he forced a smile. "Sorry, I'm a little uncomfortable. Let's play first." He got up and didn't even want to look at the large amount of chips that he had just received. He turned around and left. In this casino that had become stuffy at some point, everyone's face seemed to have an illusory smile. The air was filled with greed that almost condensed into substance, silently boiling and enveloping everything. Even if more and more people were being eliminated and losing everything, even if they didn't hesitate to bet their own businesses in exchange for useless chips for those illusory shares. The stakes also began to grow larger and larger. Even if they lost all their chips, they still stood by the gambling table and watched in anticipation. Some people were extremely regretful. They felt that they were just a little bit away from success, but they were just unlucky. And some people's faces were ashen, like walking corpses. They turned a blind eye to the luxurious service provided by the casino for free. They sat on the sofa in a daze with no focus in their eyes. They were like walking corpses. Weischer's movements paused for a moment. At the window, he suddenly turned his head and saw a swaying figure silently passing by in the night outside the window. The pale face reflected the night and neon lights. Soon, it disappeared again. There were only pools of blood that were quickly washed clean on the street. On the street, whether it was shoppers with smiles on their faces, passers-by in a hurry, or even merchants with warm smiles, they all bypassed the blood under their feet and turned a blind eye. They had long been accustomed to it. The death of a few people didn't even cause a ripple. They were already swallowed by the shining neon lights and covered in darkness. It was like walking into a modern meat processing workshop. They disappeared without a trace in the slaughter, without seeing the blood. Even the pain was only for a moment. Then everything was over. When Weischer turned his head again, he saw the scene in the corner. Amidst the bustling atmosphere, a waiter walked over to an abandoned loser and handed him a letter. That person trembled as he held the paper. After a long time, he nodded with difficulty. After returning the letter, he raised his hand and ordered a glass of whiskey. He tilted his head back and downed it in one gulp. Then he stood up numbly and walked towards the rooftop. Not long after, the falling shadow once again passed by outside the window. A muffled sound could be heard from the ground far away. Mr. Weischer. At some point, Isier Surin appeared in front of him. Her smile was as beautiful as a peony. Mr. Weischer, Lady Chiba invites you over. After a long time, Weischer retracted his gaze from outside the window. Lead the way. Please follow me. Isier Surin glanced at him with a smile that wasn't a smile, then turned around and walked forward. They passed through the lively casino and headed towards the secluded viewing room upstairs. Under the cover of the hidden origin substance, the casino's atmosphere was as heated as ever. The ship of greed continued to sail across the abyss. From beginning to end, Thousand Leaves Dragon 2 had an intoxicated smile on his face. He leaned against the warm, fragrant jade and quietly watched everything unfold. His eyes, which were immersed in alcohol and beauty, were completely unmoved, even if some of his loyal subordinates were among them. After a long time, the hunchbacked butler leaned over and whispered into his ear, "Master, the people on the chairman's list have all been taken care of." Thousand Leaves Dragon 2 turned around and glanced at him. After a long time, he nodded slightly. "When our people are buried, send some flowers on my behalf. Even though they've betrayed us, we still have to give them some face." "Then what about the bet?" the butler asked. "Isn't everyone having fun?" Thousand Leaves Dragon 2 waved his hand, casually. "Continue." "Yes." The butler supported himself with his walking stick and silently retreated. "Also, everyone else can leave as well." He stood up and put on his pants. He patted the butt next to him and smiled. "We'll continue playing later." After watching the girls leave the room, he walked over to the wine cabinet and asked, "Do you want something to drink?" "Please give me the innermost bottle of Yamazaki, the most expensive one." Isier Surin, who had just entered, glanced at the innermost part of the cabinet. "I saw it. Where's Heiki-kun?" "I'm fine with anything," Weischer replied. "What do you mean by fine with anything?" Thousand Leaves Dragon too scratched his head in frustration. You're always giving me problems, Haiki-kun. You're also a Yamazaki, right? This is a 50-year-old good wine. He picked up the bottle and walked over, sitting across from them. He gestured for them to make themselves at home and poured himself half a glass after adding ice. Thousand Leaves Dragon, you don't know how to play cards. Sigh. If I had known earlier, I would have thought of a way to get rid of you sooner. Haiki-kun, you almost ruined our alliance. I have to say, I don't know anything about this. Huaishur raised his head and looked outside the one-way glass. He saw those dazed faces in the boiling casino. They're all traitors. There's no need to care about them. Thousand Leaves Dragon, too, said, nonchalantly, that old man, Sheng Tianmu, is too good at ordering people around. He always gives me some tricky jobs. Although saying this may make you very sad, but Lord Huai Jijun, the purpose of tonight's bet is not as simple as you think. At this point, how could Huaishur not understand that this gamble was a way for the alliance to get rid of the root of the problem? At this juncture, we can't be too rough, and we can't shake the foundation of the alliance. However, there are still many traitors. Thousand Leaves Dragon too sighed, softly. This is the only way. Tonight's Empire Casino was the guillotine for traitors. They used the shares of the casino to lure everyone into it. Then, they used other methods to guide the traitors on the list to put a noose on themselves. They used the gambling method to legitimately take back the alliance's assets. In the end, after losing everything, there was only one outcome for those who owed a huge debt and had nowhere to go. On the rooftop. Let me reintroduce you. Thousand Leaves Dragon, too, looked at Izara beside him. This is Ms. Izara Mulyan, a cleaning expert from the graveyard of the returnless Ship of Greed. Tonight's bet was also her doing. She played a big part in making it so successful. You're too kind, Thousand Leaves Dragon, too. Izara Mulyan smiled and said, what a pity. I wanted to see Haiki-kun run naked. Even she didn't expect that the originally stable plan would almost fail. Everything developed as expected. The only exception was the dumbfounded Huaishur in front of her. So you're all playing me? Huaishur finally reacted. It wasn't supposed to be like this. Thousand Leaves Dragon, too, looked at Huaishur with a faint smile. I've already tested you. I even asked Dezaru to check on you. In the end, I found out that you don't know anything. Who would have thought that you were hiding something? I'm sorry, Huaishur. I'm afraid I can't let you continue. I can't give you all the benefits. Thousand Leaves Dragon, too, didn't hide anything. I've already decided to give the shares of the casino to the Luoha family. The winner of this bet has already been arranged. Huaishur was dumbfounded. So, the winner had already been blackmailed before the bet even started? Then, didn't I come for nothing? Chapter 753. After a short silence, Chiba-Ruji didn't reply. He looked to the side and said, Mrs. I'll leave the outside to you. It'll be foolproof. Izaki didn't mind him sending her away and left calmly. She didn't forget to take the bottle of Yamazaki on the table. After the door was closed, only Chiba and Huaishur were left in the quiet, luxurious private room. Speaking of which, we haven't had such an intimate conversation before, Mr. Huaishur. Chiba-Ruji took out another bottle of good wine and poured a glass for Huaishur. He sighed and said, I originally wanted to recruit you under my command. I thought we would have a lot in common. I didn't expect that old man Sheng Tianmu would be one step ahead of me. Huaishur frowned in confusion. He didn't understand what he meant. Chiba-Ruji raised his glass and made a toast. He raised his head and drank it in one gulp. He raised his sleeve to wipe the wine on his beard and said straightforwardly, I admire you very much. Even now, I still admire you very much because you're different from others. Mr. Chiba, you flatter me. Huaishe replied. If you want to recruit me, then forget it. I don't have any intention of changing my allegiance for the time being. Haha, not at all. I don't like to take away someone's favorite. This kind of thing is like a relationship between a man and a woman. It's only right for both parties to be willing. Besides, I don't have a daughter as beautiful as Li Hua. Chiba laughed and stood up. He gestured for Huaishe to follow him. She walked to the window and pointed at the dazzling neon lights below. He looked down from the highest place in the inner circle of Danbo. Do you see it, Mr. Huaishe? This is the Empire Hotel. That's the property of the Luohe family. That's the trading company of the Sheng Tianmu family. Well, there's also the Jingtong Electronics that belongs to you. And that should be the Huaishe group, right? From here to there, this is the inner circle of Danbo. He turned his finger and pointed at other places. I have a clothing factory here. This is an investment company. Below the Empire Hotel, I have 6 shops in the busiest place in the inner circle of Danbo. By the way, aren't you running a fresh market recently? I also have a seafood company at the docks. Qian Yi longer rambled on as if he was showing off his billions of assets. In the end, he said, You can choose any of these as my compensation to you. Huaishe was stunned, unable to understand. I didn't win the bet. In fact, if this was the Alliance's decision, I could only follow. Why make it up to me? He said, I don't think it's necessary. If you want to talk about it, how about we treat it as funding? Thousand Leaves Ruji shook his head and smiled, sipping the wine in his cup. What you told Akaki has already spread in the Alliance. To be honest, Huaishe, I envy you very much. He said softly, very, very envious of you. No, it's not an exaggeration to say that I'm jealous, right? To me, the current you is already shining to the point of being an eyesore. If possible, I really want you to disappear from the inner circle of the pill wave. In the reflection of the glass, the smile in Qian Yilong's eyes gradually disappeared. He was so calm that it made one's hair stand on end. Perhaps this was Qian Yilong's true personality. When he broke free from the intoxication of alcohol and beauty, he became the ruler of the inner circle of the pill wave. He saved the former Qian Yi family from the brink of destruction and became an extreme dominator with his own strength. However, Huaishe was still calm. He stood in front of the window and looked down at the night sky. When he turned around, his expression became confused. I don't remember breaking any taboo, Mr. Qian. He asked curiously, Do you need me to apologize? Kneel down and take a seat. Qian Yilong asked back, If I say yes, will you? I will, Huaishe replied, without hesitation. However, Qian Yi was amused and slowly shook his head. Huaishe, you're also a hypocrite. There's no need for that kind of superficial ceremony. I have no reason to get rid of you. He raised his hand and patted the shoulder of the young man in front of him. I know your ambition, and I also understand your purpose. I know that if I let you grow, the Alliance's rule over the inner circle of the pill wave will be shaken in the future. But actually, it doesn't matter. I don't care. To be exact, whether it's Sheng Tianmu or we don't think you can succeed. Qian Yilong told him, because we've all tried the same thing as you. Huaishe was stunned on the spot. You know, I'm already 41 years old this year. I'm middle-aged, but sometimes my back hurts after sleeping with a woman. When I wake up in the middle of the night to pee too many times, I miss the past. I miss the physique and achievements when I was young. I envy those young, bright, and sparkling things. Qian Yilong shook the ice in his cup and sneered. No matter how stupid I was when I was young, No matter how unbearable the past was, when I think about it now, it's actually full of so-called hope. He said, "At that time, we were just like you now." Old man Sheng Tianmu once tried hard, but he was as miserable as a dog because of it. His face was covered in dirt, but he still failed in the end. I was a little smarter and chose to give up early. In the end, I did my best to maintain the continuation of the Chiba family. He laughed self-deprecatingly and looked at Huai Shi. Water, food, medical treatment, and education. What you've done is much more realistic than what I did back then. But from the beginning to the end, you've neglected a problem. Qian Yilong stared into Huai Shi's eyes and asked softly, "You want to make them better, but are they really willing?" Huai Shi shook his head and answered without hesitation, "Would anyone want to live in hell?" Qian Yi laughed. "Then go downstairs to the hall and ask those beautiful girls. Tell them not to be prostitutes anymore. There's a stable job with a monthly salary of 50,000 yen for them. Do you think they'll scoff at that? Go and tell your younger brother not to be an extreme anymore. We can start over, but how can there be so many opportunities in life to start over? A missed opportunity is a missed opportunity. How can those who are used to theft, fraud, betrayal, and violence return to normal order? When they're in their 40s or 50s, they'll feel old and realize that they've accomplished nothing. They'll be afraid, regret, and cry bitterly. But other than the sweatshop, where else can take them in? The workers in the convenience store will despise your tattoos and your identity as a mixed race. When that time comes, other than this only hell that will accept you, where else can you go? There will always be people who think that as long as there's a chance, this world can become very good. However, this world is never short of opportunities, isn't it? Then why is it still so bad? While Huai Shi was silent, Qian Yilong told him calmly, "Huai Shi, even if you can give them countless chances, you can't stop people who are willing to degrade themselves. Even if it's a short change, their nature will be revealed soon. When people get used to living in a place without light, they can no longer leave the darkness. Did you know? Before you, there was someone who worked as hard as you and was filled with hope." Qian Yilong said, "That person's name is the future of God's city." God's city? Huai Shi was stunned and thought that he heard wrong. The future of God's city? Yes, God's city. The lunatic, the future of God's city. Qian Yilong laughed mockingly. "It's very funny, isn't it? The former savior wants to tie the entire race to the war chariot. He came to us before. Just like you, he thought that he could change everything and hoped that we could help him. But we didn't. We coldly watched him struggle, watched him fail miserably, and finally watched him leave alone. His assets were swallowed by his allies, his good intentions were betrayed by his supporters, and his hopes were trampled into the mud by the people he wanted to help. From the beginning to the end, we didn't stop him at all. It's because the inner circle of Danbo is such a cruel place. It's as if it's alive and will kill everything that doesn't belong to it. It will change everyone who wants to change, including the future of God's city, Shengtianmu Mi, and you. This isn't something that can be changed with one person's efforts, nor is it something that can be changed with the sacrifice of a group of people." As he spoke, Qian Yilong raised his hand and pointed at the glorious city outside the floor-to-ceiling window. "Look, Huai Shi. That's the capital tower. This is the central district. And that's the direction of the Qingshui board. Yujing, Zhuijing, Dongshan, Shanka, Shijing, look at how big and glorious the outside world is. If you look down from the sky, the so-called inner circle of Danbo, or Danbo district, is such a narrow place. Compared to this city, it's as small as a trash can. There's no distinction between nobility and lowliness. We're all ants that seek survival here. We're prisoners that are imprisoned here. We're just the kings of the infinite universe in this fruit pit. With his back facing the glorious lights, his smile became self-deprecating and strange. You want to obtain power from the Alliance and use it to change everything, but you're looking in the wrong direction. It's never the Alliance that rules the inner circle of Danbo. It's the inner circle of Danbo that rules the Alliance, and it won't accept the change that you want. In the long silence, Qian Yilong stared at the young man in front of him, but until the end, his resolute gaze never changed. No matter how shaken, shocked, or hesitant he was. "Thank you for your reminder and warning, Mr. Qian Yi," Huaishe replied calmly. "Even so, I won't give up. That's why I say it's good to be young." Qian Yi shook his head and waved his hand indifferently. "Huaishe, you can work hard. We won't stop you, but you'll fail. Everything you try will not succeed. Your efforts are meaningless. Now you can leave." In the distance, the clock struck 12. Wild cheers rang out outside the private room, celebrating the birth of the new gambling king. Outside the window, beautiful fireworks rose into the sky, illuminating the young man's eyes. It was as if a fire had been lit in the abyss. "Mr. Qian Yi, perhaps I'll fail in the end, but I don't think my efforts will be in vain." Even though he knew the final outcome, he was still smiling. "No matter how much I have to pay, even if only one person can be saved because of this, I believe that it'll be worth it." Just like that, he politely said goodbye and turned to leave. The door closed. In the silence, Qian Yilong did not speak anymore. He just stared at the light in the night sky in the distance. Quietly, he raised his head and drank the last of the wine. Chapter 754. On the way back, Huaishe sat in the car and watched the dazzling neon lights fade into the distance. He walked into the more familiar and dim streets. Under the smashed street lamps, homeless people in cardboard boxes poked their heads out of the alleys and looked around. Angry voices and scolding voices came from afar, as well as the cries of children. Amid the sound of metal scraping, the grocery store closed its doors. Soon, other than the hurried footsteps of pedestrians, there was only the sound of drunkards vomiting. It was not a happy or beautiful moment, but for some reason, Huaishe finally relaxed. It was as if he had returned to reality from a fleeting bubble and felt the familiar gravity. He closed his eyes and sighed, silently. "Boss, you seem to be in a bad mood," Shangya, who was driving, suddenly said. Huaishe asked, "Why do you say that? Is my expression that obvious?" Shangya thought for a long time, then patted his head and shook his head. "I don't know, it feels like..." Huaishe was speechless. Was this the sharp intuition of a single-celled organism? It was really admirable. He thought for a long time, and finally could not help but ask, "Shangya, if one day you don't have to do extreme Tao anymore, what do you want to do?" Shangya did not understand at all. "I mean, if you don't do extreme Tao anymore, what do you plan to do?" Shangya widened his eyes in disbelief. "Then I won't be able to live anymore, right?" "That can't be, right?" "Boss, although it's a little embarrassing to say this, I don't even know how to use a calculator." Shangya said seriously, "If I have a tattoo, the people in the convenience store won't want me. Besides, with such a bad temper, what if I hurt the customers?" Huaishe could not help but want to roll his eyes. "Okay, let's not talk about realistic conditions. I just want to know, if you have the chance to choose, is there anything you want to do? For example, dream or something." "I haven't thought about it. That kind of thing is too complicated, right?" Shangya thought for a long time and suddenly looked back. He widened his eyes and was full of curiosity. "Boss, what about you?" Huaishe didn't think that she would be counterattacked. After thinking for a moment, he couldn't help but shrug. "To be honest, I used to want to be an artist." "Well, The kind that plays music. You can't. But later, Shania, I felt that being a teacher wasn't bad
Why
either.
sure couldn't help
Seeing
but
my
wanna
students
cover his
grow up,
face.
I felt
What
like I
kind
had
of
grown up
misunderstanding
before
do you
Why
have
could
about
say
school?
anything.
Which
He
normal
frowned when he
school
saw
in
the
the
look
world
of
would teach
realization
students
on
such
Shania's
things?
face.
If you dare
It
to
feels
say,
very
I'm the
complicated.
same, I'll throw you
Shania
out of
smiled.
here.
Me too.
Awkwardly.
Cough, cough.
If you
cough.
can live happily
Shania
without
paused
being
halfway
extreme,
through his sentence.
it's always a good
After
thing,
thinking for
right?
a long time.
But I don't
He
think
asked
there's a need to
tentatively,
think so
then
far ahead.
It shouldn't be a
Anyway,
problem for me
a
to
rice
become a
ball
physical
only
education
costs 30
teacher,
yuan.
right? At most,
Teach
I'll
what?
work hard.
Why sure
As
side?
long as I'm alive,
Teach the children
there's
how to fight
always
for
a way.
territory with blades.
He thought for a moment and said confidently, "My mother taught me, deal with today's matters today and deal with tomorrow's matters tomorrow. What's the point of thinking so much?" In the silence, Huaisher looked up at him in shock, as if he was meeting him for the first time. After a long time, he couldn't help but burst into laughter. He leaned forward and backward, overjoyed. Shania looked at him from the rearview mirror with a blank expression. "Did I say something wrong, boss?" "No, your mother is really a wise person, Shania." Huaisher patted his shoulder and laughed happily. "This is the most reasonable sentence I've heard tonight." Is that so?" "Of course, we're going for a drink tonight. Want to join us?" Okay. I really want a drink. I want to eat sushi and sashimi, curry rice, fried pork chops, peony pot, ramen, tempura. I want to soak in hot springs, masa, and bubble baths. Under the gloomy moonlight, Tony held a bowl of instant noodles and sighed at the moon. The soft horse-face mask swayed in the wind, making the abstract face look even sadder. "Why is it like this? It's rare for me to come to Yingzhou for a business trip. In the bleak wind," he sighed sadly. "Is life only like this when I'm working overtime? Or is it always like this?" No one responded. Only Horseface shook his head. He picked up the bowl of instant noodles, held the soft horseface mask with one hand, and poured the soup and noodles into the hole in his big mouth. After a hollow sound like a kettle being poured, there was the sound of chewing. Finally, there was a burp. Dinner ended just like that. Perhaps there was also supper and tomorrow's breakfast. The Sad Astronomy Society animal put a lighter into the horse's mouth. After pressing it twice, 2 wisps of smoke came out of his nostrils. He looked up at the bottom of the rooftop. In the stillness of the night, the dusty storehouse was silent in the darkness. "By the way, is the place where old colleagues meet so unostentatious? The level has dropped, bro," Tony muttered to himself. He took a step forward, stepped on the edge of the floor, and looked down at the drop below the rooftop. After confirming the height, he turned around, opened his arms, and suddenly jumped up. Just like that, he fell to the ground behind him. In midair, he nimbly flipped his body, swung his horse face, and spun in the wind. He flipped his body 2.5 times, then turned his body 2.5 times. Then, like a small spinning top, he spun 1,080 degrees in a rapid fall. After drawing an exaggerated arc, he finally smashed into the fragile ceiling of the warehouse. He fell from the sky. In the burst of loud noise, the uninvited guest broke into the light behind the ceiling and fell to the ground with a hurricane. However, not a trace of dust was raised. Yeah, full marks. Under the pale light, Tony slowly got up, stroked the horse's mane at the back of his head, held the gun with both hands, aimed at both sides, and looked around. "Hello. May I ask if Mr. Phoenix is home?" In the silence, no one responded. However, Tony did not relax his vigilance at all. He searched every place in the warehouse step by step. The warehouse, which should have been abandoned for many years, was full of all kinds of equipment that should not have appeared here at all. The densely packed surveillance screens showed the images of various key areas in the capital, but more of the scenes inside the Damba inner circle. As the search program ran, the server soaked in a huge water tank continuously emitted high heat and a dull buzzing sound. The surrounding walls were hung with a dazzling array of weapons, including piles of boxes, alchemy explosives enough to blow up an entire stadium, and shoulder-mounted rocket launchers that should not have appeared in the city at all. The table in the deepest part was piled with countless complicated files, information, and records. On the wall, there was a huge map of the capital. It was densely packed with different marks. Tony approached step by step and casually picked up a piece of information. He saw the intelligence analysis about the great white fox. He picked up another one, which was the change of position in the looming hall. Then there were the records of the external operations of the Imperial Army, as well as the information of the important figures of the shogunate under the general's command, and the monthly briefing of the Ingzhou governing authority branch to the public, and finally, under the countless information and records, there was a resume printed with the mark of top secret. Under the mark of the former Dark Army, the man in the horse mask in the photo looked at himself in a daze. It was at that moment that the cold barrel of the gun was pressed against the back of his head. A long-lost, frivolous voice sounded from behind him. "Did you miss me, Mr. Centaur?" In the darkness where the table lamp could not illuminate, the former ace assassin of the former Dark Army, Phoenix, greeted him. Tony's movements stopped in place, as if he was stiff. A trap. Who knows? Phoenix asked nonchalantly, "How long have you been looking for me?" "About half a month." "Well, since the sanatorium in Shambhala found out that you wanted to skip the bill." Tony reminded him warmly, "You can't stop taking the medicine. Yu Dongri, don't worry, I stole a lot of money before I left. It's enough for me to eat until my birthday next year." Tony smiled. "Then what are you going to do after your birthday? Explode with a bang and become a pollution source?" "Thank you for your concern. I will find a good place with beautiful mountains and clear waters to dig a hole and bury myself in. When the time comes, please remember to give me flowers. I have to say your colleagues and your family are very concerned about you." Tony sighed. "In order to avoid any unpleasant friction, can you please return to the picturesque sanatorium?" Don't worry. I have confidence in you. My colleagues are magnanimous, my family is reasonable, and this world is so beautiful. Even without me, everyone can live in harmony." Behind him, Yu Dongri whistled, "As long as the company is willing to give more compensation." "I don't think so." Tony advised again, "Come back with me. Yu Dongri, many people are looking for you. The others may not be as reasonable as me." "Reason with a gun? It's because I want to reason that I only brought a gun." Tony reminded him, "It's fine if you ran away, but why did you rob the technical department's deep vault?" Now, the overhead floor of the Command Bureau, the Pollution Management Center of the Preservation Institute, and the legal office of the technical department are all looking for you. Some want you dead, some want you alive, and some want you half dead. It sounds like it's hard to persuade everyone. Who said it isn't? Tony shrugged helplessly. "So, do you want to consider my suggestion?" At that moment, there was a loud explosion, and the entire vault suddenly shook. White frost spread out from Tony's body, and with the eternal wind of frost, everything around him was frozen in huge and solid ice blocks, including Yu Dongri behind him. But when he looked back, he saw that the ice behind him was empty, and there was no trace of anyone. Only the light bulb above his head burst silently, and everything was swallowed in darkness. Then gunshots burst out. The melted alchemy bullets turned into blazing light in the barrel of the gun, crisscrossing in the empty darkness, leaving streaks of light that tore through the air. Sparks flew. As the figure stuck close to him, two daggers collided, and in a fleeting moment, two completely different faces were illuminated. One was the face of a horse with frost, and the other was an Ultraman mask that seemed to have been bought off the street. "Ace." In the midst of the fierce struggle, Tony was amused. "Your hobby is really unpopular. This is Sophie. What do you know about the Giant of Light?" Yu Dongri roared. "Eat my Ultraman flying kick." But in the darkness, not only was there no sound of a flying kick, but there was also the blazing light of a bullet behind Tony. A sharp noise was heard as the burning bullet was deflected by the military knife. Tony angrily rebuked. "What kind of flying kick is this? You don't understand, do you? Everything can be kicked, including RPGs. Why can't a bullet be counted as a flying kick?" Yu Dongri pressed on step by step, as if he had already predicted all of Tony's moves. He perfectly dodged all of Tony's counterattacks, and with a dagger and a spell bullet in his pistol, he completely suppressed the Tier 3 frost giant. Tony retreated, dodging the dagger that was stabbing at the horse's face. He suddenly abandoned the knife, and the extreme cold and blizzard in his palm gushed out, turning into a sharp long knife and slashing down. It missed. When he was about to remove the flash bomb behind him, he heard a crisp sound from where the flash bomb was. Then a dazzling light exploded in front of his eyes. He didn't even have time to close his eyes. Then a punch. Through the horse's mask, it hit his face, causing him to stagger and retreat. But there was no way back behind him, and he had been forced into a corner. The dagger that was full of cracks penetrated his palm in an instant, nailing him to the wall. Then a pitch-black barrel was pressed against his forehead. "Don't move," Yu Dongri indifferently warned. "This time, I won't be merciful, Centaur." In the silence, Tony gasped in a low voice. Through the dim, flickering light on the server, he stared at the long-lost face and his eyes that seemed to be unfocused. Finally, it dawned on him. "Time-axis misalignment?" he asked coldly. "How many times have you jumped, Yu Dongri?" As if he knew he was going to ask this, the face showed a mocking smile. "It has nothing to do with you, Tony. Why do you ask the same question every time? You should know the consequences of time jumps. Without the cooperation of the Bifrost's main frame, the time misalignment between the perception and the body will become more and more serious. Unstable time jumps would cause errors, tear the soul and consciousness, and cause time misalignment between the senses and the body." His body was active at this moment, but his consciousness had drifted uncontrollably to the future. This was not a good thing that brought about foresight. It was a precursor to collapse. It was better to say that after more than 17 jumps, Yu Dongri hadn't collapsed yet, which was really unexpected. Even if it was an illegal jump, it should have torn his soul and triggered self-destruction. It was a miracle that he could live until now. "How did you do it?" Tony asked in disbelief. "Of course, this is a secret." Yu Dongri finally smiled at him and pulled the trigger. Tony's vision turned black, and his body twitched involuntarily. He quickly lost all his strength. "Ah, a tranquilizer bomb. Are you surprised?" Accompanied by a cheerful whistle, the smiling face retreated and disappeared into the darkness before his eyes. Chapter 755. When Tony opened his eyes again, his senses told him that less than 15 minutes had passed. Beside him, on the other side of the river, the originally huge warehouse was already enveloped in flames. It burned fiercely and lit up the night sky. The sharp sound of a fire engine could be heard in the distance. "Fueke!" Tony cursed subconsciously and got up from the ground. Then he heard a familiar voice behind him. "You're so lucky." "Huh." Tony turned around and saw Ai Ching standing on the shore. She was holding her phone and quietly filming the burning scene in front of her. After a long time, she looked back and glanced at his wound. She understood and said, "Only your right hand is injured. You seem to have a good relationship with him. We've only been on a few missions together. I have nothing to do with that kind of monster." Tony's horse face twitched in annoyance. Then he reacted. Others were also attacked. Yes, according to the news from the other branches, he broke the legs of 2 investigators. and a detective was sent to the hospital because of a concussion. Other than that, there were 4 car accidents, 2 accidents. The most tragic one was dragged by the subway for 3 stations and almost lost his life. AI Ching shrugged. Compared to that, I'm more surprised that you were able to escape unscathed after finding so many clues. Tony's horse face seemed to stiffen. Then, he scratched his horse's mane and laughed awkwardly. I was in a hurry. I just found a clue and was about to catch a hot one. I forgot to report it. No, you're lucky. If you reported it to me and a whole team came today, I'm afraid he wouldn't have shown mercy. AI Ching stared at the fire on the other side of the river and suddenly said, he doesn't plan to hide anymore. Huh. Tony didn't understand. Just today, all the investigators who entered Domba's inner circle were attacked. Although their injuries weren't serious, I'm afraid they won't be able to move in a short period of time. He doesn't want us to interfere in this matter. He's even preventing us from understanding the situation. AI Ching muttered and suddenly said, the Astronomy Society is no longer trustworthy to him. Huh. Why? Tony didn't understand. If he wants to stop the future of Divine City, we're on his side, right? Who knows? But you can take a guess. AI Ching pondered for a moment and laughed softly. Perhaps it's because he concluded that once we know what happened in the Domba inner circle, we will become his enemy. Tony was stunned. Then what is he afraid of doing to us? AI Ching whispered. Stop him? No, that's not right. A person who can freely jump through time, regardless of the consequences, wants to do something. Unless an equivalent number of Doomsday Sentinels are dispatched, no one can stop him. Under the illumination of the fire, she suddenly revealed a mocking smile. Unless things get really bad, the Astronomical Society can't do anything. So that's how it is. In other words, it will cause the Astronomical Society to disregard the country's sovereignty and act ruthlessly? What? Tony was dumbfounded. He couldn't understand why AI Ching's thoughts were so jumpy. Why don't you think in another direction? What problem can't be solved even after jumping through time 17 times? No, 18 times? AI Ching said to herself. The most likely result is that Green Sun wants to tear up the tacit agreement and contract with the Astronomical Society. Taking advantage of the opening of the War of Worlds, it will trigger a conflict between the present realm and the border through hybridization, and then complete the full-scale war that couldn't be started more than a decade ago. Perron wants to use this to continue the final ritual and push the present realm to the brink of collapse. Through this war, he will become a complete natural enemy. But this is the most unlikely, because if Perron doesn't care about the stability of the present realm, then he wouldn't have needed to compromise with the Astronomical Society more than a decade ago. Green Sun is a rebel organization, but it's not a destructive element. Then, there's only one possibility left. In the near future, even without Green Sun, the Domba inner circle will become a threat to the present realm. But what can a group of pitiful creatures living between the cracks of the gong and Wu families do? The most likely scenario was that God City had completed the law of single-stranded negative strand RNA virus in the future. Perhaps it had already been completed long ago, before everyone, including Miyamoto Genichiro, had discovered it. The irreversible consequences of the time jump had already been planted, or even in the dead silence, AI Ching slowly raised her head and looked indifferently into the distance. Do you need me to continue speculating, Yu Dongri? How long are you going to hide behind that pair of binoculars? What are you hiding? No one responded. Only a red laser spot appeared on her forehead, exposed from her long hair flying in the wind. It was a murderous intent that couldn't be hidden even by the dancing flames. Tony suddenly stood up and searched his body. Finally, he pinched a small black spot under his trousers. It was a bug. Are you angry? AI Ching lowered her head and lit the cigarette at the corner of her mouth. She smiled mockingly. You've always been a coward, you Dongri. Even if you have the power, you're afraid of hurting others and never do anything. You always look like you're smiling, but in fact, you're always indifferent. You never trust others. Have you ever thought that it's because of your self-righteous and weak appearance that you're suffering today? Even your girlfriend has become your ex. Don't you plan to reflect on yourself? Miss A.I. Ching, who also holds the role of an ex, did you go to London to attend a course to learn how to use a poisonous tongue? A noisy voice came from the small bug. After all, we're colleagues. I've been your tool for so long in Exine High. Even if I didn't do anything, I've worked hard. Why do you have to provoke me? Are you referring to the incident where you pretended to be my subordinate during the day and then secretly went in and out of Sorcery City at night? A.I. Ching flicked the ash from the cigarette. Why don't you be honest with me and tell me what you took away from Sorcery City? A blurry and frivolous laughter came. As a tool, there are times when you can't do what you want. It's just a little scandal in the past. Why do you have to harp on it? As a man, I have to remind you, a woman who's always too serious is not likable. A.I. Ching's eyes became colder. Do I have to be a fool like Ji Kwang? Ha! If you want to fight, I'm not sleepy anymore. Through the static of the bug, Yu Dongri seemed to laugh. Why are we sisters so stiff? Tranquilizer bullets won't work, Yu Dongri. As if she could see that the trigger was about to be pulled, A.I. Ching reminded him coldly, I always carry a recording pen with me. It's turned on 24 hours a day, and all the records will be transferred to my email in real time. If I don't authenticate myself every 12 hours, the email will be sent out. If you want me to shut up, you'd better come up with some other excuse, okay? There's something wrong with you. Yu Dongri sighed helplessly. What kind of person would develop this kind of habit? As long as you have a good friend, all good habits can be developed. A.I. Ching tilted her head and smoked the cigarette. She stared at the fire on the other side of the river and laughed coldly. Now, give me a reason to remain silent. After a short silence, the person on the other side was silent for a long time. Then, his tone became full of expectation and trust. Can you help me? No, F*CK off. A.I. Ching replied, why don't you put the barrel in your mouth and pull the trigger? Then you'll see your beautiful wish come true. Yu Dongri sighed. What if it's not just helping me? In the long silence, A.I. Ching lowered her head and smoked. After a long time, she put out the cigarette in her hand. Yu Dongri, I can finally be sure that you did it on purpose. When she raised her head, her eyes became calm. There was no anger or hatred in them. She only said softly, once this matter is over, no matter how much value you have left to the Astronomy Society, no matter whether your adoptive father is Perron or Tyr, no matter whether you're hiding in the lunar fortress or in the trench prison, don't worry, I will personally pour your brains down the toilet. Wow, why is this treatment even worse than last time? Yu Dongri was stunned. I have to say, I really didn't. The sudden explosion caused Tony, who had been listening intently, to almost jump in fright. A burst of anger condensed into a crystallized origin substance that exploded in his hand, turning the listening device into dust. In the silence, Tony stared at A.I. Ching in a daze. A.I. Ching was also staring at him. Is this cough, a bad idea? He asked awkwardly. A.I. Ching looked at him in confusion. Are you talking about how you went around me and tried to negotiate with you, Dongri? Or are you saying that you think I made some kind of shady deal with him? Cough. What? Sorry, I'm deaf. I didn't hear anything just now. The after effects of this anesthesia are really bad. Tony patted his head and looked around. Then he clutched his hand and yelled exaggeratedly, I'm injured. My blood is all over the ground. For the next few days, I can only eat sashimi, sushi, hot springs, and a piece of trash. What am I going to do? I'm so pitiful. Ai Ching retracted her gaze. She stared coldly at the darkness in the distance that the light from the fire couldn't illuminate, then turned around and left. 6 kilometers away, on the rooftop of a tall building, there was no heavy sniper rifle. Yu Dongri held up his binoculars and stared at the figure gradually disappearing into the distance. He raised his hand and turned off the laser rangefinder on the shelf next to him. What the hell? The more we move, the more we reveal. Which one of us is the one with the cheat code? Yu Dongri tilted his head and lit a cigarette. He took a deep breath and couldn't help but sigh. In this world, it's getting harder and harder to fool women. A choking cough suddenly sounded. Dark blood overflowed from the corner of his mouth, causing the cigarette to quickly rot and turn into cotton wool. Yu Dongri hurriedly pulled out a bag and caught all the blood that he spat out. After carefully putting it away, he wiped his mouth. Damn it, I can't even smoke. This is ridiculous, he cursed in a low voice. He pulled out a medicine bottle from his pocket and stuffed a metallic pill into his mouth. Then he screwed the cap back on. Inside the medicine bottle, the sound of the pills colliding with each other burst forth. Yu Dongri picked it up and shook it. Then he shook it again. Due to the dizziness and suffocation that emerged from the medicine, he closed his eyes. There were still 8 pills left. The next day, there was a constant knock on the door. Huaisher opened his eyes from his hangover and subconsciously picked up his phone. The news pop-up window appeared. In the news of a warehouse fire somewhere in Damba Inner Circle, he saw the time. Only 5 o'clock? Who the hell is coming so early? When he opened the door, he saw old man Sheng Tianmu standing outside the door. He raised his head and looked at Huaisher's confused, sleepy face. Where are we going to visit? Why Shiki-kun? You look energetic. Sheng Tianmu said. Are you interested in accompanying me for a visit? Chapter 756. What the hell? Huaishir suspected that he was deaf. After picking his ears for a long time, he asked seriously, General? Yes. Sheng Tianmu nodded. Huaishir found it hard to believe. He asked again, that American? Yes. Sheng Tianmu nodded and pointed to his car. Let's go first. We'll talk about the rest of the way. The chauffeur handed the car keys to Huaishir as soon as he got out of the car. Huaishir slipped the keys into her trouser pocket. Sheng Tianmu's footsteps paused, and his eyelids twitched wildly. I told you to drive, not put the car away. I just gave you a Bentley last time, and you're already interested in my new car? I'm not used to it. Are you used to it? Huaishir smiled awkwardly and took out the car keys again. Sheng Tianmu stood in front of the car door. After waiting for a long time, Huaishir did not open the door for him. Not only did he not open the door, but he also stood behind and looked at him in a daze. Hey, why don't you get in the car? Huai Jijun? Sheng Tianmu sighed. Recalling this idiot's attitude of, I turn the table when the leader picks food for me, and I break when the leader drinks water, Sheng Tianmu sighed. It's Ingzhou's blessing that you didn't become a civil servant. Ignoring his blank look, Sheng Tianmu shook his head and opened the car door and sat in. He had not opened the door for himself for so many years. It was quite novel. Speaking of which, where are we going? Huaishir tapped on his phone for a long time and found that the address could not be found. I can't even find the GPS. It would be strange if the GPS could find it. Sheng Tianmu said, You can leave the capital from the south first. I'll tell you how to drive on the way. I won't go the wrong way, right? There's only one way. Huaishir. There's no other choice. Sheng Tianmu closed his eyes and sighed, helplessly. As long as I can get through, I won't go the wrong way. It was just like what Sheng Tianmu said. After leaving the city, Huaishir realized that Sheng Tianmu was right. After leaving the city for a while, there was only one road left in front of him. There were no cars on the road. Only Huaishir's car was moving forward alone. There were no checkpoints, nor were there any inspections, but he felt like he was being watched by countless eyes. On both sides of the road, Huaishir had carefully constructed all kinds of gardens and landscapes that Huaishir could not imagine. It was as if they had already entered the garden in front of the general's court. In the early morning, the gardeners began to work hard, pruning the flowers and branches, respectfully offering their lifetime skills to maintain the most perfect appearance of the work, not daring to have a single flaw. Even if the general couldn't be bothered to look at it, Huaishir felt an inexplicable pressure pressing down on him, making him involuntarily nervous. He straightened his body and drove in front. Finally, he asked, Why do you want to see the general? Sheng Tianmu still did not open his eyes. He only asked, At this time, other than the general, is there anyone else who is willing to look at us? Huaishir's hand holding the steering wheel stiffened. Finally, he felt the pressure he had been facing these days behind Sheng Tianmu's tired face. The existence of the command of peace was like a heavy burden. For the inner circle of Donbua, it was undoubtedly a sudden disaster. The consumption tax reform was pending in the struggle between the political parties, and there were constant storms. It sounded like a simple change in the tax point, but in fact, the impact behind it affected the entire Ingzhou and even Southeast Asia. Behind this was the conflict and friction between the new capital controlled by the Wu family and the old tycoons behind the Gong family. Once the peace order was officially issued, the existence of the Donbua inner circle would be like weeds floating in the dark and in the endless battles between the various parties. It would be extremely fragile, internal and external troubles. It was also under this huge pressure that the alliance allowed the existence of the Huaishir group to soar like a rocket. They united all forces to protect themselves. They did not ask to win the final victory, but only hoped to survive after the storm. The gangs of Dongxia could close their doors and get out of the matter, but the mixed race had no choice. If they did not seek protection, they would only end up at the mercy of others. Even if they died, their corpses would be used as scapegoats and the source of all evil to bear the sins. If there is anyone who can help us at this time, it is only His Excellency, Sheng Tianmu said in a low voice. For a long time, the inner circle of Donbua has been able to exist because of the acquiescence of that lord. I only hope that the general can be merciful. Will he care? Huaisher did not understand. Who knows? We'll have to see if they're interested in what we have. Sheng Tianmu rubbed his old face and sighed silently. For this meeting, I used up all the accumulated favors and brought all the treasures collected by the alliance. If we fail, we will have no other choice. Huaisher asked, "What do you need me to do?" "You don't need to do anything. You can't represent the alliance. Your role today is only as a driver. Don't speak. Don't make any unnecessary movements. Don't care about the humiliation of others, if they will still look at us." Sheng Tianmu said, "You just need to avoid any accidents and ensure that I can live to see the general." Along the way, Sheng Tianmu seemed to be resting with his eyes closed, but in reality his body under the robes was always tense, alert, and on guard. Huaisher always felt that he was overly sensitive, but he could understand the feeling of not wanting any accidents to happen when there was a glimmer of hope in front of him. The wind was calm, and the waves were calm. There were no attacks, no accidents. Under Huaisher's escort, they had already arrived outside the general's residence before 7 in the morning. There was already a receptionist waiting at the door, and then brought them into the lounge to serve them tea and snacks. His Excellency, the general, thought too much last night, and only went to bed a few hours ago. The time of meeting with you may be slightly delayed. I ask that Your Excellency, Sheng Tianmu, be patient and wait patiently. After saying this, the receptionist respectfully left and closed the door for them. As time passed, hurried footsteps could be heard outside the door, but no one pushed open the door and entered. Instead, they coldly passed through the door and walked in another direction. At first, Sheng Tianmu would prop up his body and put on a respectful expression every time. However, towards the end, his expression gradually dimmed. Huaisher once suspected that this was some kind of trick to accidentally enter the White Tiger Festival Hall, but after cautiously looking around and using the excuse of going to the toilet 4 or 5 times, he found that this was just an ordinary lounge. The entire residence was bustling with activity. The attendants ran about in an orderly manner, carrying out the daily cleaning and labor. Sometimes there were stern-looking warriors and respectful officials coming in and out. Apart from the servants who occasionally poured tea and water, it seemed that no one cared about these 2 specks of dust that didn't belong here. If not for Sheng Tianmu's words, Huaisher couldn't help but urge him. Even if it was useless, helpless, he could only wait patiently. This wait lasted for an entire day. At noon, the dock area in the Donbua Inner Circle was bustling. This was perhaps the place where the Donbua Inner Circle interacted with other areas the most frequently. One of the 5 ports in Kyoto was located in this place, although it was limited by the construction of the berths and couldn't dock large ships because of the geographical location and the fishing season. It attracted a large number of fishing boats to dock. Especially in the summer and autumn every year, it was the busiest time. The fishing boats that had just returned to the port were busy unloading their goods, and the wholesalers from various fresh markets were already ready. Trucks rolled in and out of the seawater and fish scales on the ground, and in the pungent fishy smell, many buyers from restaurants were also waiting for the goods from familiar merchants. With the fishy smell of the sea all over his body, fisherman Takahashi, who had been on the ground for less than an hour, wiped the sweat off his forehead. His hands clumsily completed the calculation of the accounts. After confirming that there was no one around, he shouted loudly in the noisy market, "Sakamoto! Sakamoto! Where the hell did you go? Come and move the goods." On the fishing boat behind him, there was a clear response, but it wasn't the hoarse response of a middle-aged man, but the loud voice of a young girl. "Coming, coming, please wait for a moment." The boxes that were piled up to a height of 4 or 5 meters seemed to have grown legs, staggering down from the boat. The dull sound of water echoed inside, and the buyer next to Takahashi changed his expression, and he couldn't help but take a step back. That was a tank filled with seawater and seafood. If it fell, he might not be able to keep his life. What was even more exaggerated was that this huge living thing that needed to be moved by a forklift actually came to him step by step with the support of a pair of hands. Finally, with a bang, it was placed on the ground. From behind, a young and pretty face with a delicate ghost horn squeezed out smiled at Takahashi embarrassedly. "Mr. Sakamoto said he went to the toilet and asked me to help him." The buyer sucked in a breath of cold air and doubted his eyes. Was this really a human? Takahashi's expression, which was rarely sunny, became gloomier. "Toilet? I think he went to visit a prostitute. I hope I don't get fooled by that guy again. It's okay, I'm strong anyway." The girl called Shinki chuckled. Takahashi retracted his gaze and looked at the buyer. "I'm sorry for making a fool of myself, Mr. Aksushima. The things we ordered are all here. Please check them." "It's okay. We trust the people recommended by Ms. Jiang." The young man with dyed blonde hair smiled politely. After paying the bill, he said a few polite words and immediately turned back to instruct the porters to load the cart. From the beginning to the end, Shinki watched curiously from the side. These strange people seemed to have more or less tattoos on their bodies, and they didn't smile, but they were straightforward, and they didn't even haggle. They didn't even need to record the monthly payment, but paid on the spot. Many fishermen had turned down orders from other places and gave priority to the goods to them, and took the initiative to give a generous discount. "Is there going to be a big shopping mall nearby?" Shinki blinked and looked forward to it. "Next time we can go shopping." "Humph, they're all hypocrites." Behind her, the young man who was scraping fish on the side of the boat snorted coldly and cursed in a low voice. "I don't know what those guys from the paper group are doing." He had a huge birthmark on his face, and his keratinized skin curled up like scales. When he talked about that word, his expression was full of disgust. Shinki was stunned for a moment, and then again she looked back, thinking that she had misheard, and didn't react. "Toshio, you just said the paper group?" "Huh. Sister Shinki, don't you know?" Toshio spat into the sea and said disdainfully, "It's the new leader of the villains in the city, the paper group." In order to do business for himself, he monopolized all the water and vegetable supply in the inner circle of Danbois. He wants to eat all of it alone. Shinki was confused. "Paper group? Group?" "Yeah, the name is strange, right?" Toshio snorted. "I heard that he's also a pervert. Last time I saw him taking off his clothes on the street. Shameless." Shinki felt that her brain couldn't process, and felt that something was wrong. Then he's not necessarily a bad person, right?" Toshio paused for a moment, and his eyes drooped, unable to hide his hatred. Brother Ryu was killed by him. Auntie Uchiyama was such a good person, but now she's crying every day. He even pretended to ask people to give him money, as if he wants his stinky money. Toshio paused for a moment, and his hand holding the knife was so tight that it turned white. He lowered his head and squeezed out a hoarse voice from between his teeth. "Sooner or later, I'll kill him." In the low sound of footsteps, a burly shadow appeared behind him. He froze for a moment, then turned around and saw Takahashi's cold expression. "Brat, I'm warning you for the last time. I don't care about your business. Once you get off the boat, you can go wherever you want. But if you talk like a hooligan on my boat again, I will kick you off the boat." You understand? Toshio paused for a moment, then reluctantly nodded and continued scraping fish. After a long time, Takahashi turned around and left. For lunch, they had seafood rice with unlimited caviar and salmon. This was one of the benefits of working on a fishing boat, so Shinki ate more than half of the pot. After lunch, Takahashi called Shinki into the cabin, then opened the safe inside, took out a thin stack of banknotes, and handed it to her. 400,000, this is your salary. Yeah, thank you, Mr. Takahashi. Shinki raised the banknotes in her hand as if she had received a treasure, and excitedly waved her hands. This can pay off a lot of the debt. When will we set off again? At least 4 or 5 days later. Takahashi shook his head, glanced at Shinki, and hesitated. Huh, what's wrong? Shinki didn't understand. Keep an eye out, Takahashi said in a muffled voice. I don't know why you need money so urgently, but when you get ashore, be careful of those people who say sweet words. The inner circle of Donbua is not like other places, and people are sinister. He didn't know how such a stupid mixed-race girl grew up. A week ago, she came looking for a job. If she wasn't strong enough to do the work of 4 or 5 people, and only wanted an ordinary salary, Takahashi didn't intend to hire her. He had been prepared for her to cry after a few days of work, but he didn't expect that she had done so much work in a week, and she didn't even complain about being tired. She was too stupid. If it weren't for Takahashi's strict watch, she would have been cheated out of her money by those lazy people on the boat. Huh. Shinki was puzzled. I feel that everyone is quite good, and they don't smell like bad people. Are you a dog? Takahashi rolled his eyes, pointed to the cabin door, and told her to leave quickly. He was too lazy to pay attention to her. But before she left, he stopped her with a serious look. Don't spread Toshio's words outside. That's just a silly boy who doesn't know the immensity of heaven and earth. Do you understand? Shinki nodded blankly, as if she didn't understand. Her silly look made Takahashi even more annoyed. She was so brainless. Don't be deceived to go somewhere as soon as you get ashore, thinking of the consequences. Hey, Shinki! He got up and chased after her, asking, Have you found a place to work? Huh. Shinki turned back. Takahashi hesitated for a moment, and finally sighed. Didn't you say that you used to help in the kitchen? I know a restaurant I know, and it's hiring recently. Hey, oh, okay. Shinki's eyes widened in excitement, and she rushed over and held his calloused hands. Please be sure to introduce it to me. There was a crisp sound. Takahashi's face turned green. Shinki, you, huh? Mr. Takahashi, why are you crying? Let go of my hand. My wrist is dislocated. Oh, fortunately, it's okay, Mr. Takahashi. I'm sorry. Holding the address and business card given to her by Takahashi, Shinki, who got off the boat, still looked back in the direction of the port uneasily and sighed in distress. I seem to have screwed up again. Sister Shinki, you should be careful. Next to her, Toshio snorted. That kind of middle-aged single old man may have bad intentions. You're so beautiful. What if one day he's lustful and does something to you? Okay, don't say that. Uncle Takahashi has his own difficulties. Shinki smiled and rubbed his hair. Where are you going next? I don't know. Toshio's face was lonely. After my brother left, Auntie Uchiyama has been very sad these 2 days. I don't want to disturb her. That's why she needs someone to comfort her. What are you thinking about? Family is very important. Shinki squeezed his head hard until Toshio cried out in pain. Okay, don't waste money. Buy a gift for Auntie Uchiyama. She must miss you very much. Okay, what's wrong? Don't be sad. Shinki thought for a moment and suggested, how about I treat you to ramen? There's no limit. Tisk, it's not a manga. Who would like that except for Uncle? Hey, ramen is very good. It's cheap, high in calories, and it's very filling. Sometimes it's even free. Shinki said, Jeanne, she said. In short, when you grow up, you must eat more. Let's go. Shinki dragged Toshio to eat ramen, and then supervised him to buy a gift for Annie Uchiyama. Shinki was still worried, so she resolutely walked Toshio to the place. It's already so late. I don't need you to walk me. The closer they got to the place, the more Toshio resisted. He didn't dare to enter the door. On the other hand, Shinichi rolled up her sleeves and punched the wall beside her. I'm very strong. Don't worry. With a bang, a big hole appeared in the wall. Even Toshio, who knew of her monstrous strength, widened his eyes in shock. The people who had poked their heads out of the dark alleys with ill intentions swallowed their saliva and then locked themselves back into the shadows. Okay, let's go. Auntie Uchiyama must be waiting for you. She patted Toshio and pushed him in front of the dilapidated door. Toshio took a deep breath, summoned his courage, and knocked on the door. No one answered. He knocked again, and still no one answered. In the silence, the two looked at each other and had a bad feeling. But soon the door opened. Instead of the gloomy clouds and desolation that they had expected, the family was filled with a warm and harmonious atmosphere. An old man with a walking stick walked a smiling middle-aged woman to the door. When he saw the two of them, he couldn't believe his eyes. Toshio, you're finally back? The old man hugged the child in front of him in surprise. You brought your friends. Come in, come in. This is Toshio. The middle-aged woman smiled. Just like Annie Uchiyama said, he's young and cute. Auntie, who is she? Toshio looked at the woman warily. How rude. The old man patted his head. Don't be rude. It's been Miss Sonoda who's been comforting me and helping me these past few days. No, we're both members of the fraternity. I'm just doing my job. Auntie Uchiyama smiled and waved her hand. I'll be leaving first. If you two have time, you can come to the fraternity and participate in activities. We can only overcome difficulties together if we help each other. After a few more pleasantries, she turned and left. Jeanne, she stood there in confusion, looking in the direction she left. That big sister had a strange smell on her. Chapter 757. Time was ticking away, second by second, with the ticking of the clock in the corner. The rhythmic ticking of the second hand repeatedly spread in the lounge. Every tick was like a strand of spider silk. Those invisible spider webs floated in the air and landed on the two of them. They coiled around each other, layer upon layer, until finally they became an airtight cocoon. In the silence, he felt an indescribable suffocation. 6 hours later, another 6 hours passed. The soft and comfortable sofa seemed to have become an iron felt, and the ticking sound of every second was like a ruthless axe and hammer. He could feel his hope gradually withered and wilted after each collision. Several times, Shang Tianmu clenched his hand in anger and wanted to get up, but he seemed to have no strength to support himself and let go of his hand in vain. Patiently waiting, patiently waiting, patiently waiting, patiently waiting. The sound outside the door still sounded from time to time, but this time it didn't make him look forward to it. From the servants' hurried running to the ladies' delicate laughter, and finally there was no more sound. When the night gradually appeared, a lone lamp in the room illuminated the faces of the two, like two inconspicuous specks of dust, so small that no one could remember them. Do we still have to wait? Huaishir asked for the 5th time, turning the phone in his hand that was close to a dangerous battery. Wait. Sheng Tianmu said numbly, wait. How long do we have to wait? Since we're already here, we have to meet. Before that, we have to wait. Sheng Tianmu's lips opened and closed, swallowing the second half of the sentence. His eyes were numb and calm. Wait until death. Until the minute hand turned again, when Huaishir was ready to use the toilet to get some fresh air, he heard low footsteps behind the door, gradually approaching. As if sensing Huaishir behind the door, the person raised his hand and knocked on the door unhurriedly. Huaishir's movements paused for a moment as she felt an oppressive chill. Through the thick wooden door, he could hear the faint sound of the sharp blade in the scabbard. The chill fell on his neck and quickly dissipated. It was just the other party's subconscious vigilance. He took a step back. The door opened from the outside. It revealed the appearance of a middle-aged warrior who did not care about his appearance. She was wearing loose sportswear, with a hairpin on her head and a headband on her forehead. She looked like she had just come back from a long run, but there was an old long knife hanging from her waist. His face was unshaven. Only his eyes were as big as the eyes of an old monkey in the mountains, shining with a faint, clear light. After entering the room, he stared at Huaishir in front of him and raised his eyebrows as if he was surprised. "Are you Huaiji?" Huaishir nodded. "Yes, I am a warrior under the general. You can call me Zhu Chuan. I heard that you defeated Xiang Chuan. Oh, that little guy Xiang Chu. You are not bad." He raised his hand and patted Huaishir on the shoulder. After a few words of praise, he looked at Sheng Tianmu solemnly and bowed slightly. "Recently, I have been busy with official business. It is really difficult for the general to leave. There are many people under me who have neglected you. Please forgive me, Mr. Sheng Tianmu." In the face of the general's most capable subordinate, Sheng Tianmu did not dare to be arrogant. He propped up his body and bowed as well. "It's nothing. I just waited a little longer." Even though he said that, the old man stared straight into his eyes, waiting for him to continue, until Zhu Chuan nodded and stepped aside. "Please come with me. After the general finishes his business, you have 15 minutes to meet." Sheng Tianmu nodded. He was not surprised or excited. Instead, he smiled calmly. "Okay," but the hands behind his back were clenched with excitement. It was difficult to restrain the crazy heartbeat at this moment. After a long period of sitting, he finally got the result. "Let's go, Huaiji." He smiled at Huaishir and walked out of the door. Huaishir could feel that Sheng Tianmu's footsteps, which were slightly unstable and hurried, seemed to be gradually relaxing. It was as if a heavy burden had been lifted from his shoulders. Sheng Tianmu was not afraid of this long period of sitting and being neglected. He was only afraid that he would return empty-handed today. But before Zhu Chuan arrived, no one knew what the result would be. If he just waited, that would be too good. Even if he was neglected or forgotten, it did not matter. It was not that there was no room for discussion. On the contrary, this was just a show of strength. The general wanted more than he could give. But it did not matter. He could give even more, as long as there was room for discussion. Huaishir stood behind him, watching as Sheng Tianmu's back was gradually bent by a formless force, and he humbly moved forward. Even from a great distance away, it was possible to sense the origin-substance fluctuations that weren't concealed at all. It was like a mighty flood, enveloping the entire manor, wild and savage. They followed the corridor forward, passing through the silent courtyard and arriving at the beach. A bonfire was lit in the distance, brightly lit. Girls in bikinis were running and playing on the beach with water guns, showing off their impressive figures and beautiful faces. The waiters on both sides of the beach were respectfully interacting with them, and no one dared to raise their heads to take a look. Even from far away, they could hear the sound of laughter coming from under the umbrella. The golden-haired, middle-aged man sat on a chair with his back to them. He tossed the cards in his hand onto the table and cursed unhappily. "What kind of luck is this? You won my money again. Sooner or later, I'll hang you bastards." The subordinates who were playing cards with him were already used to this. They put away the chips on the table and thanked the general for his reward. When they sensed that Ju Chuan had returned, they politely stood up and said their goodbyes. The game was temporarily over. The general stood up and scratched his buttocks through his pants. Finally, he turned around and looked at Sheng Tianmu, who was walking in. He thought for a moment and suddenly realized, I remember you, your old man Sheng Tianmu, right? We've played cards a few times before. When did you come? I almost forgot. Why didn't you rush me? I just waited a little longer. I wouldn't dare to disturb your mood. Sheng Tianmu respectfully responded and bowed. Take a seat, take a seat. There's no need to be so polite. I heard that you've been in a lot of trouble recently. The general looked at him and shook his head. He looked at Huai Shi and asked curiously, Who is this? Being stared at by the pair of golden eyes from far away, Huai Shi felt that his disguise had been exposed, and he couldn't breathe. In the face of this powerful man, the number one person in the fifth stage, he respectfully took a step back and bowed with the etiquette of Yingzhou. I'm from the Alliance, Huai Shibai. Young man, you're quite polite. The general held a beer cup and laughed. He pointed at him and ordered Ju Chuan beside him. I'll talk to his parents. Get someone to take the children to find something to eat. Don't be shy. It's rare for you to come here. At least there's enough beer and barbecue. Yes. Ju Chuan nodded. A servant took Huai Shi to the table on the beach and sat down. Soon, wine and barbecue were served. It was very sumptuous. Huai Shi, on the other hand, wasn't embarrassed at all. She enjoyed the performance of those beautiful big sisters and started to eat without any scruples. But the glimmer of hope in his heart gradually sank. From far away, he could see the two people talking at the card table. Tell me about it, Sheng Tianmu. The general raised his cup and took a big gulp. He said calmly, You spent so much energy and time to meet me. You can't just want to attend tonight's banquet, right? Sheng Tianmu bowed his head and asked sincerely, I'm here on behalf of the Dongbua Inner Circle to ask for your protection. He didn't waste any time in this meeting. He didn't show any suspense and didn't hold anything back. Sheng Tianmu bowed his head and told the general about the current predicament of the alliance, all the offerings that the Dongbua Inner Circle could offer to the general, the next plan, and the contributions that they could make to the general in the future. And the general listened to him politely. From time to time, he nodded in agreement with the bright future proposed by Sheng Tianmu and felt indignant about the discrimination and oppression that the mixed race encountered. But his eyes were fixed on the girls playing on the beach in the distance. He appreciated the exquisite and beautiful scenery in front of him. He drank, ate, and smoked cigars. From beginning to end, he didn't look at Sheng Tianmu. He just seemed to be listening. In fact, he didn't recognize any of the words. He didn't think about any of the offerings and requests that Sheng Tianmu brought. But Sheng Tianmu didn't dare to stop. Seizing this short period of time, he did everything he could to attract the general's attention, to make him change his mind, to make him reconsider everything that he had brought upon himself, even if it was only for a moment. But Huai Shi felt that his efforts would not be of any use. Perhaps Sheng Tianmu's hope should have been disappointed long ago. Such a long wait. Perhaps it wasn't the general's show of strength. Perhaps he simply forgot about this matter. He was simply busy with other things. Busy drinking, busy having fun, busy playing cards with his subordinates, busy visiting prostitutes, busy doing other happy things. He wasn't interested in your price. Your suffering had nothing to do with him. Today, you worked hard to come here and meet him. Then he would meet you and treat you like any other guest. He would listen to your troubles and pleas and then comfort and encourage you. But please don't misunderstand. This is just polite. The eagle god soared in the sky and lived in the temple in the clouds. Even if he was banished, he could only live in this remote island country and was exiled to the narrow territory of Ingzhou. The suffering on the ground was too insignificant. He wasn't interested in it. How do you feel, my guest? A strange and tender voice came from beside him. It was a child who sat down with a plate, black hair, black eyes, and a fair complexion. He seemed to be from Rome, but he seemed to have the characteristics of other races. It was difficult to distinguish. The child, who was about 10 years old, carried a large plate of barbecued meat and beer as he sat beside Huai Shi. As if he was very familiar with her, he asked in a friendly manner, "How is the general's hospitality?" "Of course. I'm overwhelmed by your favor and can't thank you enough." Huai Shi didn't have time to think about the identity of the visitor. Since he came here with Sheng Tianmu, he was part of the alliance. Naturally, he couldn't be arrogant and make enemies for the alliance. Even if they couldn't reach anything in the end, he shouldn't be hated. The mischievous, black-haired child laughed. He opened his mouth and ate the barbecued meat in front of him. His mouth was full of sauce. He looked cute and tender. Who knew whose child he was? "It sounds very polite." He suddenly asked, "What do you think of this place?" "It's magnificent and beautiful. It's like a fairyland on earth." Huai Shi praised sincerely. "Well, that's true. Whether it's food or clothing, it's the best in the world. The best snow beef, the best beer, the best sauce, and the best oil." The best chef in the world, the best models and stars, the most loyal subordinates. There's endless money to lose and endless luxury and beauty to enjoy. The little boy nodded in agreement. Even the height of the children's dining chair is just right. It's easy to sit up. It's really enviable. You should hurry up and eat more. It wasn't just what the child said. As far as Huai Shi knew, the general had 6 more luxurious mansions like this in the whole Ingzhou: Kyoto, Edo, Hiroshima, Nagasaki, the most beautiful places in the country, the most dangerous and amazing scenery, were all the private property of the general. The strongest warriors, the best beauties, and the most beautiful scenery. All the glory and splendor in the world were rightfully his. Even just thinking about it, one could know how arrogant and indulgent his daily life was. It was unimaginable how happy he was. If it was in the past, Huai Shi would be so envious that he would drool all over the floor. But now, he couldn't be envious at all. Because that person, who had everything, didn't look happy at all. The tyrant, who was once the strongest fifth-order warrior in the world, who was only 1 step away from being the master of the lineage, lost everything in a gamble. Not only was he expelled from America, but he was also exiled to this remote island country. He was also forcibly tied to the position of general by the former king of the White House. From then on, the fate of the country was linked. He could only associate with these yellow-skinned monkeys that he didn't care about at all. He should have been the most free person in the world, but he wasn't free at all. Who would be able to understand this anger? No matter how beautiful the scenery and luxurious the enjoyment was, to him, it was just a song and dance in a cage. It was a program to relieve his boredom in his long retirement life. Now, a group of insects came to him and told him that another group of insects oppressed him. Why would he care? During the conversation, Huai Shi sighed silently and finished the last barbecue on the plate. After stopping the waiter from serving him, he wiped his mouth and got up to say goodbye to the child beside him. The meeting was over. It was time for him to go. "Come often in the future." The child said goodbye without raising his head. "I like you very much. Let's play together next time." "If there's a chance," Huaisheng smiled politely and greeted Sheng Tianmu, who was walking over. Sheng Tianmu still had a smile on his face. He didn't look angry or disappointed. He just declined other hospitality and turned to leave with Huaisheng. Behind them, excited shouts came from the beach. Okay, the game has started. The blindfolded blonde man raised 2 water guns and rushed to the beach excitedly. The eagle is coming. Where are my little babies? The girls dodged the water guns in a panic and covered their sensitive parts that were hit. They exclaimed in a sweet and sexy way. They looked so happy. Outside this beautiful paradise, dark clouds gradually gathered in the clear night sky in the distance, covering the lights of the city. It was going to rain. Chapter 758. What was the result of the meeting? When they left the city, Huaisheng couldn't help but ask in the driver's seat. There was no result. After a long time, Sheng Tianmu, who was resting with his eyes closed in the back seat, looked up and said slowly, "The general doesn't intend to protect Dambwa Inner Circle, but he didn't completely reject it. He only said that measures will be taken when necessary." Then, do we continue the discussion? Huaisheng asked. It's just a politician's tone. There's no need to continue the discussion, Sheng Tianmu murmured. It was originally just a glimmer of hope. Now that things have come to this, I'm too naive to expect to rely on others. Since I was born as a bastard, I can no longer dream of redemption. He said, let's prepare for war with all our might. In the long silence, Huaisher's phone suddenly vibrated. A new email popped up on the navigation page. It was from an unknown address, but at a glance, it was a message from Hu Po's stinky sister. The tax reform bill is pending. The outcome of the tug-of-war between the two parties is hard to determine. The emperor has lost his patience. Be prepared. There will be nothing in 5 days. When it rains, it pours. Huaisher couldn't help but want to sigh. Couldn't the heavens give him good news? As if hearing his prayers, there was a sudden burst of fire in the woods in the distance. Steel rose into the sky with a spurting flame aimed at their location, and then fell from the sky. A 60 millimeters caliber, great news, hit them in the face. RPG. Huaisher only had time to curse before he stepped on the accelerator and turned the steering wheel. The car suddenly changed direction in the midst of speeding, swinging its butt and brushing past the weapon that should never have appeared in Yingzhou. Then, the explosion burst out from behind them. The blast swept over, causing the car to tremble like a fallen leaf and almost overturned. When Huaisher finally stabilized himself, he saw the lights of a motorcycle speeding in the night ahead. The engine roared, and the lights quickly magnified. In the midst of ear-piercing screams and excited shouts, the rider suddenly jumped off the car. The next moment, the motorcycle and the car collided. The violent tumbling caused the sky and earth to spin. Huaisher was thrown out of the car window and landed on the ground. He heard the roar of a motorcycle in the distance again. Several people on motorcycles excitedly turned the corner and chased after him. Someone jumped out of the vehicle and rushed straight to the smoke-shrouded vehicle, pulling Sheng Tianmu out of it. There was a cut on Heaven Eye's bald head, blood flowing out. When he was pulled out, he was gasping for breath with great difficulty, coughing violently. Then that person raised his hand, pulled out the shiny blade, and raised it. Bang! After a soft sound, the person who rushed forward stopped moving. He stiffened on the spot and slowly knelt on the ground, revealing the muzzle of the gun in his hand that was still emitting faint smoke. That old man stretched out his hand, pulled out the blade from his opponent's hand, raised it, and hacked down on his opponent's head. Blood splattered everywhere. He raised his face and roared. "You bastards, don't you know that I was born with the name Heavenly Eye?" He roared hoarsely. "You, a bunch of useless bikers, want to take my head?" His blood-stained old face was full of ferocity. When he took off the crooked and humble smile, he became as violent as a beast. The veins of blood in his eyes burned like a raging fire. "Come on!" He challenged the attackers on the motorcycle. "Fight with me." Not only the opponents, but even Huaisher, who wanted to rescue him, was shocked by his brave attitude. But no matter how shocked he was, now was not the time to be in a daze. Huaisher, who had climbed up from the roadside, reached out and tore the car door from the broken basket. She aimed the car door at the person in front of her and slammed it down on his head. The loud sound of something breaking rang out, making one's scalp tingle. Without giving these guys a chance to start the engine, Huaisher had already rushed into the darkness behind the lights and smashed both the person and the car. In the dark forest, in the distance, the person holding the launcher was stunned for a moment. Then he threw away the cumbersome rocket launcher in his hand, took out a large caliber sniper rifle from the box beside him, and aimed at the fierce battle in the distance. In a flurry, he wanted to aim at Sheng Tianmu's head. But before he could do anything, a mournful cry came from the sky. In the deep night, countless steel birds whistled, their sharp wings covering the last of the starlight, and the pure darkness swallowed everything. Only the high-pitched screams rang out, and then quickly extinguished, disappeared without a trace. Huaishur never dreamed that he would be attacked with an RPG on the edge of a metropolis like the capital. He almost capsized, and Sheng Tianmu died in the hands of this group of bastards. This group of gangsters had changed their guns and entered a new era. He hated that he was an undercover agent of the Astronomy Society, and he couldn't even get a missile. How deep was this world's malice towards a tool like him? He had already prepared for a big battle, but unexpectedly, there were no sublimators among them. It was simply a group of racers who didn't know the immensity of heaven and earth. Looking at their age, the oldest was only in his 20s, but they didn't hesitate at all. Each of them seemed to be used to this kind of thing, and each one was more ruthless than the other. Unfortunately, it was of no use at all. If ruthlessness was useful, what was the use of sublimators? The almost trampling battle quickly destroyed the morale of those people. At the very back, the commander supervising the battle didn't have time to be excited, and the smile on his face collapsed. He quickly turned the car around, pressed the accelerator to the max, and ignored his subordinates preparing to escape. And in the same place, Huaishur bent down, picked up an iron bar from the motorcycle on the ground, took a deep breath, and aimed at his back. The iron bar flew out with a loud explosion. A straight afterimage streaked across the air. Immediately after, the roar of an explosion burst forth, and the motorcycle in the distance fell to the ground. Huaishur walked forward step by step, looking down at the half-dead commander on the ground. He casually grabbed his collar, turned around, and walked towards Sheng Tianmu. It's the little bastards of the foolish company. As long as they can take drugs, they will do anything. Sheng Tianmu didn't even bother to look at them. They're just cannon fodder. There's no need to interrogate them. The commander, whose hair was dyed in all sorts of colors, instantly turned pale. He opened his mouth and screamed, "It's the K-Gang. The K-Gang gave us money to bang." Sheng Tianmu raised his hand and exploded his head, not wanting to hear the rest. Huaishur was stunned. "Huh, don't you plan to investigate who's behind this? Is there a need? Iron King Society, K Society, Heaven Fool Company, Illumination Cult, New G Group, Chivalry." He indifferently retracted his gaze. From the moment the general refused to protect us, all the illegal societies in the capital have become our enemies. This was just the beginning. Behind him, the wreckage of the car exploded, and flames rose in the night. Thick smoke billowed, covering the starlight. As the fine sound spread, a light drizzle fell from the sky. This was the precursor to the arrival of a storm. An hour later, in the headquarters of the Alliance, smoke lingered in the silent conference room. 2 hours ago, remember you jumped off a building, and a suicide note was left at the scene. Lawrence said faintly, "No matter what, it means that our 40 million was wasted, and the Ingzhou government refused to further communicate with Green Sunday." Huang Chuan raised his eyes and asked, "Does the commander have no plans to go further?" Lawrence was silent for a long time, then shrugged. This is the realm, separated by 3 major blockades. Green Sun, who was far away at the border, couldn't do anything. Lawrence stretched out his hand and pulled up his sleeve, showing the complicated alchemy array on it, and the huge power sealed under it. The 10 disasters have given me the miraculous imprint of the frost and hail disaster. When necessary, I won't be stingy with this power. As for Moore, his expression was helpless, and he smoked silently. How could there be anything more than that? If they really wanted to protect the Donbua inner circle, Green Sun, as a rebel organization in the realm of reflection, should stay far away from it. Even if the Alliance and Green Sun had an improper relationship, both sides had always tacitly maintained boundaries. Private transactions aside, if it really became a branch of Green Sun, there was no need for the Astronomy Association. The Gong family and the Wu family could join hands and destroy the Donbua inner circle as a political achievement. In the silence, everyone's face was gloomy. They wanted to laugh, but they couldn't. They would die if they resisted, and they would also die if they didn't resist. Who didn't want to laugh in such a funny situation? Everyone has supported each other for so many years. Green Sun naturally won't leave. Lawrence sighed and put out his cigarette. Although it's not appropriate to say this, the door of Canaan will always be open for you. Canaan, the lower-level blockade border. Green Sun's base camp, the nest of all the Anti-Astronomy Association forces in the realm of reflection, and the greatest threat of the Astronomy Association. If there was no way out, there was indeed a possibility of escaping to Canaan. This was destined to be the last choice. Even if they couldn't survive, they could still go to Liangshan. But once they made such a choice, it was no different from becoming Green Sunday. At that time, even if the Donbua inner circle could survive, as the remaining members of the alliance, the others would definitely suffer a tragic purge. The situation that the mixed breeds faced would only be worse. After so many years of struggle, once the tide came, it would collapse like a fortress on the beach and disappear without a trace. In the gloomy atmosphere, Sheng Tianmu sat in his chair expressionlessly and looked at Huaishir, who he had brought to listen to the meeting. Huaishir sighed and raised his hand. I know that, logically speaking, I shouldn't speak in a meeting between the leaders of the alliance, but I have news. The peace order is imminent. After conveying the information from Hupa, the atmosphere in the meeting room became solemn again. 5 days later, Qian Yilong frowned. Are you sure? If it's just a groundless rumor, it's too sensational. How did you know? Under everyone's suspicious gaze, Huaishir couldn't help but shake his head and sigh tiredly. You guys just treat it as the information that I exchanged with my blood, sweat, and tears. I have already verified it through my own channels. Sheng Tianmu added, Huaishir's information is correct. In the silence, everyone was stunned for a moment. The eyes that looked at Huaishir became sympathetic and respectful, recalling the female commissioner of Looming Hall, who was rumored to have dealings with him. They seemed to have understood something. Steel wire balls, gas tanks, iron nails, leather whips, and all kinds of tragic scenes wanted to say something, their eyes, but stopped. In the end, he raised his hand and patted him on the shoulder, encouraging and praising, Huaishir, you are a good man. It's been hard on you. He actually sold his body for the Donbua inner circle. Huaishir was a plain person, amazing. And the female general of the Luoha family looked at Huaishir with admiration, as if she was looking at a fine jade. She didn't expect this young man to have such a unique skill in addition to killing and arson. Realizing that he had suddenly become the #1 gigolo in the Donbua inner circle, Huaishir rolled his eyes helplessly. He didn't know how to explain. Chapter 759. After daybreak, the news had already spread like wildfire. The alliance was not airtight. Even after many rectifications and purges, there were still traitors who slipped through the net. Moreover, Huaishi's family was not the only one who was well-informed. The other societies also had their own channels. And the grim situation was in front of everyone's eyes. Once the peace order was issued in 5 days, the order that the Dambwa inner circle had been trying to maintain would probably face an unexpected and terrifying impact. Heavenly materials and earthly treasures belonged to those who were virtuous, and these ill-gotten gains that were like dung were the favorite of those who were not virtuous.
You just got married
For so
not
many
long
years,
ago, right?
The foundation that
is
the
pregnant.
alliance had established
Shan
in the
Xia's
capital
words
had
made
attracted the
Shuai's
attention
face
of
even
many
paler.
people with
The
ulterior
man trembled
motives.
and
Not
knelt
to
on the
mention
ground,
other things,
wanting to kowtow
the
and
existence
beg for mercy,
of the Empire
but was
Hotel
pulled up
alone
by
was
Shan Xia.
enough to attract
Don't worry.
a lot of hostility.
I won't use them to
Not
threaten you.
to mention the friction
Yamashita
and
shook
hatred
his
between
head
the
and
alliance
continued to tell
and
him,
the other
"Boss
organizations
said,
over
life
the years.
is not easy.
Once the peace
And
was
it's
gone,
even harder
and
to be a
there was
hybrid.
a big reshuffle.
Men have to be
Even if the
responsible for their
Dambwa inner
families
circle
before they
remained
can talk
neutral,
about
it would
loyalty
still become a
and
fat
other
piece of meat on
things.
the chopping
You
board.
didn't run away
Who told you
after
to
getting
have no
pregnant
backing
like a
and no
scumbag.
status?
It's good that
the
you
next
can take
morning,
responsibility.
Huaisha stood in front of the
Whether
window
it's for
and
your
saw
family
the
or
vast
for your
crowd
own
on the
life.
street outside.
Boss won't stop you
The
if you
messy
wanna leave.
vehicles were filled
But since
with
he had gone
people.
against the
The
society's
crowd
rules,
seemed
he
to be
should
fleeing
not
for their
be
lives.
an extreme Tao
They
expert
almost
anymore.
blocked the
He
streets
should cut off
like a
his
colony
finger and
of
find a
migrating
proper job in the
ants.
future.
They were running
Otherwise,
away.
you know the
Coward,
consequences, right?
bastard. At the foot of the mountains,
Shanya's
eyes roar
turned
came from
cold.
downstairs.
Shuai
and he
was
was
stunned for a
angrily
moment,
scolding
and
the team
nodded
member in front of him.
repeatedly.
Have
Very
you
good.
forgotten the kindness
At the
that
foot
the
of the
boss
mountain,
gave you?
slowly got
Now
up,
you want to
took
run
out a
away
ship
just
ticket from his
because
pocket,
we're almost
and
here?
threw it in
You
front
traitor.
of Shuai.
You want to leave?
This is boss's
Fine.
wedding gift.
Cut
to
your
you.
finger.
You
Take
dog.
it as Huaixi
He
Group's
threw a knife
last
in front of the
friendship to
team
you.
member
and
Shuai
glared
from
at him.
now on,
Cut
we
your
are done.
finger and get out.
Shuai was
Walked out
stunned
of
for
this
a long
door
time
and cut all
he stared
ties
at the
with
red
Huaisha
packet on the
group.
ground.
Don't say
and
that
couldn't
we're
help but
brothers
cry
anymore.
After a long
The
time,
young team member's
he
face
raised
was
the knife
pale,
in his hand,
and he knelt on
and
the ground.
suddenly cut off his
After
little
a
finger.
long time,
He didn't
he
even
grabbed the
bandage it.
knife and
He
pressed
just
his
turned
hand
his
to the
head
ground.
and kowtowed
The others around
a
him
few times
wanted
in
to
the
persuade
direction
him,
of
but they did not
office.
dare to speak.
Finally,
Some
he
people
picked
had
up
the
the
same
ship ticket
idea
on the
as
ground
him
and wanted
and
to
turned
leave,
to leave.
but they were
If
frightened
anyone
by the
has the same
punishment
idea
in front
as
of
him
them
and
you
did
can
not
say
dare
it.
to speak.
At the foot
A
of the
hand
mountain,
reached out,
looked
and pressed on the young
at the
man's
people
arm.
around him.
It was the foot
Boss
of the
said
mountain.
that we can't force
Hey,
him.
he
The
won't
foot of the
stop
mountain.
those who want to leave.
What do you want to do?
YG Group.
Shanya
Leave a finger,
was so angry
take the ship ticket,
that his face was
and
distorted.
leave.
But
He
only
glared
this
at the
morning,
person
who
who
stopped
all
him.
dead? Do you have the
Talk.
same idea as
Is
this
he the
coward?
only one who wants to
At
leave?
the foot of the mountain,
In the silence,
he glanced at
5
him
people
and
came out one
ignored
after
him.
another.
He
picked up the
continued to
knife
look
on
at
the
the young
ground,
man kneeling
cut
on the
off
ground,
one of their fingers
and
as
asked,
an apology.
"Your name is
took the
Shuai,
ship
right?"
ticket and
Shuai
left with
nodded in a
gratitude
daze.
or indifference.
Boss wants me to tell you something.
Huaishi,
He
is
said.
this really okay?
Behind Huaisher, Shuai asked, "If this spreads out, I'm afraid it's not good for the unity of the group. Is unity maintained by this kind of thing? What's the use of a unity that can be broken by cutting off a finger?" Huaisher shook his head and sighed softly. "Let them go. At least it's a way to survive. And you, Shuai, leave too." Shuai was stunned and puzzled. Huaisher reached out and took out a ship ticket from his pocket and handed it to him. "The ship will depart from the dock this afternoon. I've booked a first-class box for you. It can fit your whole family. Don't worry about the old furniture. After you go to White Town, take the money you've saved over the years and enjoy your retirement." Shuai shook his head in fear. "I don't want to leave." "I know, but you're an old man who can't even wield a knife. What's the use of staying? Are you a burden?" Huaisher asked. "After you got out of prison, you haven't had blood on your hands. Now that it's time to retire, you should think about your children." This. Shuai looked blankly at the ship ticket and shook his head. "Brother, this is against the rules." "Rules?" Huaisher shook his head and suddenly asked, "Do you know what Mr. Fujimoto said to me before he died?" Shuai was silent. He said, "Please, Mr. Huaiji, I'll leave everyone to you. Huai Shi sighed and shrugged. It's fine if you say that he's young and can fight, but he left you, an old man, to me. Did he want me to send you to fight with others? Didn't he just want you to have a good ending? I originally planned to take it slow and gradually change my name. Unfortunately, time waits for no one. Let's go, Shui Hei. What's the use of a cashier staying here? He's still waiting for you to hand over your work to him at the foot of the mountain. Amidst the silence, Shui Hei was silent. After a long time, he slowly bent down and took the ship ticket from Huai Shi's hand with both hands. Thank you for taking care of me all this time. When he said goodbye, he unconsciously burst into tears. Huai Shi waved his hand and watched him turn and leave. After a long time, he looked at the rushing crowd outside the window again. The time was still too short. With his current ability from last night until now, he had only booked a few smugglers' boats. It was already not easy to arrange an escape route for the people in the group. As for the people outside, he was already powerless. Where could they go? Those who had made money, changed their identities, and registered their household registration had long moved out of Donbua Inner Circle to other cities with better security and friendlier to outsiders. As for the powerful and influential people, they could directly take their own private helicopters and hide in the best border hotels to wait for the storm to pass. And where could those people who didn't even have household registration and identity documents escape to? It didn't take long for his guesses and expectations to be confirmed. The mixed-race people who had escaped the inner circle of Donbua didn't even have time to catch their breath before they realized that the police force on the streets of Jingdu was shockingly exaggerated. The identity checks were even stricter, especially for those with obvious mixed-race characteristics. They were stopped by the police before they could even take 2 steps. In order to live for a few more years and stay away from the abyss, those who managed to sneak into the present realm from the border had already gone bankrupt. How could they have the ability to settle their identities? As for those who wanted to hide at the border, they found that they couldn't even pass the customs. As for Yomi no 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 Yomi under the shadow of the inaction order, all parties could foresee the coming storm. In this kind of time, when they couldn't even take care of themselves, how could they spare any mercy to the mixed breeds? It didn't take long for those who gritted their teeth and abandoned their families to run away to be badly battered by the cruel reality. After learning from the mistakes of others, he dejectedly returned to the only place where he could stay. He resigned himself to fate. Woof! Just outside the inner circle of Donbua, at the entrance of a restaurant, a girl who had just started work for the first day had just lifted the cover in front of the door when she smelled something unusual from the street. She looked at the rushing crowd in a daze. She didn't understand what was going on. Boss, something seems to have happened outside. She curiously peeped at the scene outside. Behind the counter, Ms. Jinjiang put down the phone in her hand. She was in a daze for a long time before she sighed with melancholy. I'm sorry, Jinxi. It's your first day, and you've already encountered this kind of thing. I'm afraid it won't be safe here from now on. Is there anywhere else you can go? Huh? Am I fired? Jinxi was dumbfounded and immediately became nervous. Did I do something wrong? I can change. If the salary is too high, it doesn't matter if it's a little less. No, just take care of my meals. I'm very hardworking. Ms. Jinjiang heard her and looked at the small horns on Jinxi's forehead. She couldn't help but sigh and reach out to rub her hair. Forget it. Since you don't have anywhere else to go, just stay here. You can also accompany Tomoko, but you have to eat less. The food in the restaurant can't stand you eating like this. For the next few days, try not to go out on the street. Just stay in the restaurant. She said, the gangs on the street are going to fight. Don't get hurt by accident. I'm not afraid of that. I'm very strong. Jeanne, she clenched her fist and solemnly promised, if there are bad guys, let me protect the boss and Tomoko. Okay. Looking at her naive and serious look, Miss Jean Jiang couldn't help but laugh. She pinched her cheek and said, then I'll leave it to you. Chapter 760. In the afternoon, Yuan Zhao slept until the sun was high in the sky before he got up. He pretended that he did not play with his phone until late last night, and was about to go out to work when he was stopped. It was Yi Shuya. Are you awake? If you're awake, come to the executive lounge, and I'll give you the cake. He was shocked. This strange woman actually didn't send him out to run around, and even bought him a cake to fix it. There must be a conspiracy. Yuan Zhao trembled with fear and trepidation as he carefully sat across from the table. He tasted like he was chewing wax as he ate the cake that Yi Shuya ordered out of excitement, causing him to be unable to finish it. He did not know what was going to happen next, but what he received was an unbelievable answer. I don't need to go anymore. Yuan Zhao was stunned. That's it. Yes. Yi Shuya nodded. After thinking about it, you've been working hard for this period of time. I might as well give you a vacation. Where do you want to go to play? Buy whatever figurines and models you want. As for your salary, it's already been sent to your card. What? Yuan Zhao was dumbfounded. He blankly looked in the direction of the inner circle of Danbois. He was puzzled. We're just going to leave it like this. Yi Shuya poked the fruit on the banana parfait and asked back, what else can we do? The God City will be so tight in the future that we can't catch it. There are many ways to solve the problem. Why waste time on a tree? Then that group of bastards, just leave it like this. We're from Dongsha, Yuan Zhao. As a foreigner, isn't it annoying to meddle too much in the affairs of the locals? It's not like we're idols. Every time you go out, don't you feel uncomfortable being followed by a few people taking pictures? Yi Shuya raised her head and suddenly asked, moreover, when did we say we're going to help them? Bastards have never had anything to do with Dongsha. Don't you think there's enough trouble? Yuan Zhao was stunned. Looking at the calm woman in front of him, he could not believe it. Those are hundreds of thousands of innocent lives. How can you be so cold-blooded? I don't know if they're all innocent, but if the temperature of blood is limited, leaving it to the most important people is only natural, right? Compared to being responsible for strangers, shouldn't I be more responsible for Dongsha? Yi Shuya chewed on the crisp in the cream and put down the fork, since the Ingzhou officials don't care. Then as bystanders, we don't have much room to intervene. Quit while you're ahead, little brat. Otherwise, you'll only sink deeper and deeper. In the end, not only will you get into trouble, but you'll also be despised by others for causing trouble. Then what are we here for? It's probably a message for some narrow-minded old man. You just need to do the chores. Yi Shuya shrugged slightly and glanced at his watch. That's right, the current Geographical Association's survey report is still at the front desk. If you have time later, help me bring it up. I have something to do, so I'll leave first. What are you going to do? Behind the table full of bread and cakes, Yuan Zhao became alert. Why didn't you bring me along? Are you going to the spa for an essential oil massage too? Yi Shuya turned her head and looked at him. Soon after, she realized, I almost forgot. You're almost at the age where you're curious about big sisters like me, but you're not my type. Yuan Zhao subconsciously wanted to retort. He wanted to say that he was not interested in Auntie, but before he could open his mouth, his survival instinct took a step ahead and sent out an alarm. In the tragic hallucination of dozens of trucks coming head-on and knocking him flying, he obediently swallowed the rest of his words. With great difficulty, he squeezed out a regretful expression. That's really too bad. Good boy. Yi Shuya withdrew her gaze with a smile that was not a smile. She turned around and left. Only when she passed by the window and saw the surging tide of people in the distance, she could not help but silently sigh. In the quiet room of the Heaven's Eye residence, the old man's face was still stuck with a Band-Aid. He threw one tragic photo after another on the table. Last night, the chivalrous Paths people were completely annihilated. He smoked a cigarette and sighed helplessly. How tragic! The president and the cadres were all completely wiped out. Not a single chicken or dog was spared. This time, the Iron King faction is determined to expand their power. After forming an alliance with the new G group, they're going to go all out. The K faction and the Fool's Company are together again. And the inner circle of Donbua was sandwiched between the two sides. He frowned and sighed. Back then, when you encouraged this old man to compete for the position of president, you didn't say that there would be such a thing. On the opposite side of the table, Yu Dongri, who took off his wig to fan himself, rolled his eyes. In any case, in the end, it's going to be bad. You've lived for so long. Could it be that you're still afraid of death? What's with being afraid after you've had your fill? Death is death. Fear is fear. These are two different things. Heaven's Eye waved his hand and looked at the opposite side. You've been here for so long and you still haven't settled the future of the God City. This time travel of yours doesn't look that good. There's no other way. That guy is getting harder and harder to deal with. It was clearly very easy to kill him the last few times. Yu Dongri could not help but want to scratch his head. But when he thought of his hair that had been washed day by day, he suddenly became more sorrowful. Can you not count on me for everything? Without Bifrost's active cooperation, the time jump can only be a watered-down version. It's already a miracle that the inner circle of Donbua hasn't exploded on the spot. If you ask me, this has to be the fault of a certain B** starred. Whenever he's involved in anything, it's easy to go wrong. The last few times this happened, I've already scattered the ashes of the God City. In the end, I've searched almost every place in the inner circle of Donbua and killed more than 80 clones, but he still managed to escape. This is F** King. Ridiculous. Heaven's Eye sighed helplessly and sipped his tea before he suddenly asked, have you heard of the fraternity that's been spreading in the inner circle of Donbua recently? What's that? Yu Dongri frowned. The fraternity? The kind that I know about. That's right. Heaven's Eye nodded. It's a group of people who find a time, find a few chairs, sit in a circle, and take turns telling stories. Then everyone will cry and be filled with hope for life again. And then start over. The main idea is to help and support each other. It's very sunny and upbeat. Sounds good. Yu Dongri agreed. Do they have a hair growth support group? Introduce me. Heavens, I couldn't help but sneer. You actually think it's good? Is there a normal person in the world who would come to the inner circle of Donbua to rope in a bunch of B** stards to do good deeds? That's hard to say. You can't be too absolute. You have to believe in life and in hope. Yu Dongri shrugged and sincerely sympathized with a certain guy who had been shot in the head. We investigated the fraternity's composition and found that most of the members were a bunch of old and helpless wretches. However, someone who snuck in discovered that someone was distributing this kind of painkiller. Heavens, I raised his hand and took out a plastic box, which he placed in front of Yu Dongri. There was only a white pill inside, and it was impossible to tell where it came from. Yu Dongri frowned. Did you find out what it was? Most of it was common, with some traces of illicit drugs. It can reduce the pain slightly when complications occur, but it doesn't help at all. At best, it's just a placebo. Where did it come from? A pharmaceutical factory donated it on credit. Interesting. Yu Dongri picked up the box and tossed it up and down. I'll take a look at it later tonight. Maybe Before he could finish his sentence, his face suddenly changed, and he froze on the spot. His fingers clenched so tightly that the box in his hand was almost deformed. He convulsed on the spot and almost flipped the table over. Heavens! I was stunned for a moment. After so many times, he was already prepared. Ignoring the fact that it was scalding his hand, he subconsciously grabbed his precious teapot. Immediately after, Lu Dongli vomited pitch-black blood. The blood fell on the table and made a sizzling sound. His face was pale. The sudden fluctuation of origin substance alerted the guards outside the door. Hurried footsteps rushed in, but heavens, I shouted at them to stop. Don't come in. Heavens, I turned around and yelled, nothing has happened. Everyone, return to your positions. The footsteps paused for a moment before disappearing into the darkness. When he turned around and glanced at Yu Dongri, he discovered that Yu Dongri had already climbed to his feet, pulled out a metallic pill from his pocket, and popped it into his mouth. His expression finally improved slightly. All right, there's no need to go. Yu Dongri wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth and panted with difficulty. The pharmaceutical factory has been empty for a long time. It's filled with explosives. Anyone who goes in is going to die. If it weren't for the fact that I was careful, I would have been blown to death inside. That guy is getting harder and harder to deal with. The future of the divine city woke up from a nightmare. He opened his eyes, his back drenched in sweat. He had been killed once again in that nightmare, which was so realistic that it seemed almost real. He was in the laboratory that he had prepared for himself. Just as he was completely immersed in his research and breakthroughs, the door was pushed open from behind him. A person carrying a gun walked in, aimed at the back of his head, and pulled the trigger. Blood and gore splattered everywhere as he collapsed to the ground. Even his consciousness was blurred, and his experience of rapidly fading away was so real. He was dead. When he opened his eyes again, he discovered that he was still lying on his bed, and in front of him was a ceiling covered in mold and stains. It was as if everything that had just happened was just a simple dream. But this kind of dream had already appeared far too many times. Death by gunfire, decapitation, poisoning falling objects, being tortured, accidents, and even fire and incineration. Every dream was vivid and lifelike, and the despair and fear in every dream were so real that it made one shudder. And in the countless dreams and deaths, no matter where they met, whether it was day or night, only that pair of cold and indifferent eyes were the same. This was the only thing that he remembered very clearly. That person's name was Yu Dongri, Resonance Physique. A low and hoarse voice came from the darkness. Congratulations, future of the divine city. You have lived up to your name and escaped death once again. Chapter 761. Resonance Constitution. The future of God's city lowered his head and looked at his hands. The corners of his mouth curled up. He didn't know if it was joy or mockery. It was hard to understand. This kind of dream talk is actually real, but where does the so-called constitution reflect? He sneered softly. Nerves? Blood type? Bones? Organs or lymph? What is the so-called resonance? A mixed race like me can also resonate with the Rainbow Bridge? Doesn't this prove that the soul of a mixed race is no different from that of an ordinary person? Exactly. The voice in the darkness replied. Mortals are always scheming to divide inside and outside, level and difference. But in the eyes of our Lord, all things are equal, and there is no difference. The so-called mixed race is just closer to the abyss. God's city, even though you are a little extreme, you still possess wisdom. You should be able to break free from your narrow prejudice. Don't preach. The future of God's city refused. I don't intend to believe in gods. It doesn't matter. The hoarse voice said, Our Lord doesn't care whether you believe or not, and it won't change reality and results. Our alliance is not limited to the so-called good and evil, but for the common unity of all things. God City, you just need to remember this. God City sneered. The element of destruction longs for the unity of mankind. Is there a better joke in the world? There is. The voice said, For example, the beast of eternal life longs for death. It was hard to describe whether this strange logic was too rigid or the sense of humor was too unique. For a moment, it was difficult for God City and the future to distinguish. However, there was something wrong with trying to understand the existence of this crown with human logic. After being together for so long, God City found that his ally was not so much a devil from hell, but an AI that completely contradicted common sense. However, this was good. For a scholar like the future of God City, having a strong and powerful ally was simply a disaster. On the contrary, it was much more pleasant to work together like this. God City, you have talent. You were born this way, not only wisdom but also ability. The voice told him, For the Astronomy Society, people like you are priceless treasures, an indispensable part of the Bifrost, a consumable in the time jump, just like you Dongri. Shin Chung was silent for a long time. He is the one who brought
willingly
you the information
since I
of the
can feel
future.
the resonance.
This was the
Why
so-called
can't I jump like
resonance.
The
Just
three
as
great
two
seals
tuning
are
forks
not things
would
that can be
resonate when they
used
were close
just
to
by
each
having a
other.
constitution.
The recording
You
of
also
events
need
could be
complicated
transmitted in
development
this way,
and surgical
every time you
modification,
Dongri
a huge
went
supply
through
of
a time
energy,
jump,
and the
it would bring
resonance
him
of
an
the Bifrost
unforgettable
itself.
death
The
record.
voice replied.
He could only
However,
passively obtain
even without
things from the
development
future
and permission,
and avoid his
and
original
unable to
death
jump through
over
time
and
you
over
can
again.
still sense the
I can
fragments of
only
the
be
future
killed
that
by
belong
him
to you
over and over
through
again.
Lu Dongli.
God City suppressed his anger and asked in a low voice, Am I such a comical character? No, Divine City, you should have realized this. Every time you repeat it, you become stronger. The voice said decisively, The time jump of the Bifrost is not omnipotent. Using it without scruples like he did is a special case. However, as long as I am here, he is destined to not cross the final boundary. Give the loser a chance to start again, but even if he starts again, he still can't change the cause of the past and the effect of the future. All he can do is to use this meaningless reincarnation to futilely delay the arrival of the end, just like a dozen years ago. The resonance system you have, my existence, and now everything in the Donbwa inner circle all prove this. If any of these conditions were missing, it would not be possible to establish such a situation. God City, fate is on your side. In the boiling darkness, a solemn and ferocious silhouette slowly emerged. It was a giant-like existence, under the tattered black robe. 6 arms that were as thin as tree trunks spread out, showing the true essence of the abyss in a terrifying manner. The souls of the past cannot kill you. You have the future. The existence called Yushur said so decisively. It was the wearer of the destruction elemental, the rancher's crown, the spirit of hell born from all the plagues and diseases in the world, the true messenger of God. And just under the complicated limbs, there were countless tubes and equipment that connected its body and essence, combining it and the huge machine into one. Under the cold light, the embryo in the petri dish was slowly growing. In just 3 days, it had formed the embryonic form of a baby from the state of a fertilized egg, and it was even accelerating. Almost there, the future of God City stared at the sacred embryo and whispered softly, Let the hybrid be liberated from this sad fate. Just a little bit more. Just a little bit more, brother. In the depressing atmosphere in the office of Huaiji Commercial, Huaisher couldn't help but sigh, looking at the 2 burly men from the Russian Federation across the table. Huaisher pounded the table bitterly, raised his hand, and gestured. I admit that this is a very tempting price, but unfortunately, it's still a little bit less than the price in my heart. Why don't you try a little harder? Otherwise, in this world, how can you let the traitor run away and not let the traitor eat grass? The two men from the K party gradually became indifferent and unmoved. They just looked at Huaisher indifferently. They didn't raise their price again. Huaisher suddenly felt even more regretful. Or introduce your corporate culture, enthusiasm and loyalty from the Russian Federation, how beautiful the exotic scenery is, and so on. Everyone is respectful to each other and united as a family. Don't be so cold. I'm not charging you. Can I say a few more words? What answered him was a disdainful snort. Just across the table, the middle-aged man, who didn't say a word after entering, slowly stood up and told him, "No one can bargain with the K party. Why, sure." He said, "Either you agree or you die. That's all. Die." Here, Huaisher smiled, pointed to his neck, and gestured a cutting gesture. "You came to my territory and came to my front. I served you tea and treated you as guests. But what about you? But you're only here to tell me to surrender, or else I'll die. Then, do you want to cut off my head? Now, do you have a knife? Do you want me to lend you one?" He reached out and pulled out a wakizashi from the drawer beside him, nailed it to the table, and then hooked his finger at the two guests. "Come on!" The other man with a tattoo on his face was furious. He stood up, but was held down by his boss. "Since you dare to refuse the big boss's mercy, then prepare to welcome the war. Why, sure." The man took off his sunglasses, revealing gray eyes covered with white clouds, and said with pity, "The so-called Ingshou people are just like this, especially the mixed-race people. You have no fate with true honor, and you won't understand the value of loyalty." "War?" Huaisher was stunned and doubted his ears. "You're talking to me about war?" He was almost amused. Full of puzzlement and curiosity, he asked seriously, "Are you declaring war on me? Gentlemen, you want to choose war, but do you really know what a real war is like? Not to mention the monstrous changes caused by the steel torrent and the battle of the pedigree, the battle between the Astronomical Society and the Golden Dawn on the endless sea, or even the fierce battle on the scorched earth of Australia, just the malicious competition between the Ivory Tower and the Ivy League for a hell compared to those huge and terrifying battles. Even the mafia's fight for territory could be considered a war." "No way. No way. Are you serious?" It was like seeing a child holding a world peace card and saying, "Your father used the world peace card to defeat my father, and now I'm going to use the world peace card to defeat you." Where did this child come from? That dumbfounded expression was probably mistaken for panic and fear, right? The Russian Federation people looked at him with disdain. They were about to speak, but they saw Huaisher waving his hand. "It doesn't matter, it doesn't matter." Huaisher waved his hand and said generously, "If you want to be my enemy, then come. If this is what you call a war." He held back his laughter and tried hard to squeeze out a serious expression, but the mockery could not be concealed. It was like watching a neighbor's child playing with the electric switch. "As long as you're happy." The tattooed face was livid, and he was furious. He suddenly took a step forward and reached out to pull out the wakizashi on the table. He wanted to make this bastard's blood splatter everywhere. But at that moment, the wakizashi on the table seemed to suddenly disappear. Then, with a flash, it appeared again. Huaisher held the hilt of the knife in his hand, and it had already nailed the man's left hand to the table. It pierced through, and blood spurted out. A tragic scream sounded. The Russian Federation people waved their fists in anger, but Huaisher was expressionless. He just twisted the hilt of the knife slightly, and the man lying on the table twitched again. Only the sputtering blood fell on Huaisher's face, which made his handsome face look particularly ferocious. "You came here with arrogance and showed me mercy. You humiliated my hospitality, trampled on my kindness, and expected me to wag my tail and beg for mercy. But from the beginning to the end, you didn't understand one thing. He stared at the middle-aged man in sunglasses and told him word by word, "Your so-called honor and value have never had anything to do with me. I am above your honor, and I despise your value." Now, Weisher pulled out the blade in his hand and put it back into the scabbard amid the screams. He said softly, "You can go back and prepare for your so-called war." He said goodbye. Chapter 762. Weisher said goodbye. So they said goodbye. Although some things that no one wanted to see happened in the middle, at least it could be considered a happy ending. In the office, watching the two people from the Russian Federation leave, Weisher raised his hand and picked up a call from Sheng Tianmu. "The people from the Russian Federation also went to your place." Weisher smiled. "They sat for half an hour and left. Isn't it a bit late for you to call now?" "I only called you because I know they left," Sheng Tianmu said. "You should be careful these days. Before anything happens, a local conflict may start to break out. You've been in the limelight recently. If I were the people from the Russian Federation or the Iron King Party, I would definitely get rid of you first. I thought you would blame me for humiliating the emissary and stealing the limelight from you. It's okay. I just scolded the people from the Iron King Party and had a good time. I don't mind." Sheng Tianmu generously let it go. Offend the K Party and the Iron King Party at the same time? Weisher asked, "Are you serious? What else? Can kneeling down and kowtowing guarantee safety?" Sheng Tianmu sighed softly. "This old man will really kowtow, and I will kowtow again and again. But kowtowing is useless. Weisher Kuan, you should be careful. I've been feeling uneasy recently." I always feel that things are not so simple." Sheng Tianmu sighed irritably. "In the end, it's too difficult for a mixed race to live in the world of Yingzhou, even if they do evil. But what if they can't even survive doing evil?" Weisher was silent. After a long time, he said, "There will always be a way, right? Who knows, one day at a time. It's just like that." Sheng Tianmu shook his head and didn't say anything. Immediately, he became finally
nervous.
reminded, "Is there a problem with the ship before?" "No, it was the ship to White Town has already set sail. Remember to be careful. My wife took my son-in-law's family there. I understand. Don't worry. And didn't find me sneaking after hanging up the phone." Between the houses, turned around, smiled, and looked at the schedule hanging on the wall. "My daughter seemed to be water companies, very angry. Fresh food she markets, just called me pharmaceutical and scolded chains. Me. I'm all so the grand old, aspirations it's so embarrassing. Were cut short, but there's turmoil. No other way. Even when I think that the guy at the foot of the mountain just taken charge of the was accounts, now almost falling apart. Rest assured. This world was that guy always never so writes cruel. A receipt. It was when so he goes difficult out to create beautiful things. After everything but is settled, too easy someone to has to do them. The accounts to perhaps avoid taxes. AI Ching, right? Was right to what disagree if someone with embezzles? Him? From the very beginning, paper boss, she knew never that she was wasting her time. You have to have in a trustworthy person to keep an eye on his head. Weisher before he could light his cigarette and didn't speak. He heard a knock on the door. The houses between the houses. When he said come he didn't know what to say. Someone pushed the door after open a long time, and came in. He raised his hands. It was still the same suit that had been ironed countless and times. Solemnly reported. The old man adjusted his glasses after a long time of astonishment with an awkward smile. Weisher couldn't help laughing loudly. Weisher reached out to hug him and patted his back vigorously. "Why haven't you left yet? Welcome back. Between the houses." There was no news more pleasant than this. The return of the house injected a shot of confidence into the low morale of the Huai paper group. Even the 47-year-old treasurer had already planned to roll up his sleeves and fight with everyone. The group members, who were originally in a daze and uneasy, also calmed down a lot. On the contrary, between the houses began to have a headache. They had just been away for half a day, and the guy at the foot of the mountain had made a mess of his accounts. The accounts didn't match at all. Between the houses, he was so angry that his eyes turned red. He began to pull the receipts and invoices from the foot of the mountain one by one, Even through the door, he could hear the angry roar from the foot of the mountain. Isn't it just 20? It's not 2 million. I'll take out the money myself. Here, give me 9,980. You bastard, don't look down on the treasurer. Between the houses, he slammed the table and roared, I'll give you 2 million, but you have to settle this 20 yuan account for me. Also, why should the lunch of the group be included in the reception fee? Do you know the words meal allowance? Idiot. I didn't graduate from high school, so I don't know. Come and chop me, come on. In short, it was very lively. The group members also breathed a sigh of relief, although the people who stayed didn't waver much because of the people who left the group. After an entire day of oppressive atmosphere, they now felt inconceivably relaxed. Under the shadow of the nothing order, there were about 20 people who left. This number was less than Huaishur had expected, but Huaishur didn't count those who made up the numbers. The official members of the Huai paper group were only about 200 people. It couldn't even be considered a medium-sized enterprise. However, it was still quite convenient to manage. There was the bone burial sanctuary to check the favorability value and loyalty at any time, so there was no need to worry about the traitors. The traitors who dared to come to the Huai paper group were basically all turned over by Huaishur. The rest who were really sinful could only be suddenly infected with a strange abyss disease and sent to the ICU for 10 days. With the support of a large group, they could avoid losses to the greatest extent during the nothing order. When the time came, when all this was over, he could start the plan again. Just as he leaned on the chair and thought about the next arrangement, he heard the noise downstairs suddenly stop for a moment, followed by the sound of heavy footsteps. Shangye didn't even have time to knock on the door before pushing it open and entering. He looked nervous. Boss, it's not good. Look at the TV. What's wrong? Why are you suddenly so nervous? Huaishur rummaged for a long time before finding the remote control and turning on the TV. Just as he was about to ask which channel it was on, he saw the scene of the cooking program on the Kyoto TV station suddenly tremble. Then an emergency news was broadcast at the scene of a major traffic chain accident in the Donbua district of Kyoto. Under the viaduct, thick smoke rose from the toppled oil tanker. As the helicopter swooped down, there was another violent explosion. The flowing gasoline spread around with flames, igniting the houses next to it. The firefighting vehicles continued to spray water jets, but they couldn't extinguish the flames. There were cries and shouts. The children who were rescued from the fire were still calling for their parents, but no one responded in the noise. And just as the camera was filming, Huaishur saw the wreckage of a car next to the burning oil tanker under the thick smoke. There was also the logo of the Alliance on it. That was Sheng Tenmu's car. Yesterday, he drove that car to visit the general, but today it was hit by an oil tanker and exploded. What about Sheng Tenmu? What about the old man who called him half an hour ago? As his phone vibrated, an email from Akasaki Makoto popped up. The president was attacked. Hurry to Kashihara. Huaishur cursed and jumped up from the chair. He grabbed his coat from the hanger and said, Shangye, get the car. We're going to the hospital. Shangye didn't say anything and simply took the car keys to start the car. In less than a minute, a car sped out from the back alley of Huaiji Commercial and rushed to the Kashihara hospital built and operated by the Alliance. On the way, Huaishur called Akasaki. What's the situation? The oil tanker was hit. Fortunately, the president was cautious and had Tamada-san with him. Otherwise, he would have been in trouble. But he was still affected by the explosion and is now undergoing surgery. The specific situation is still unclear. Who did it? It should be the work of the K-Party. Once the soft approach doesn't work, those Russians will throw away all pretenses and resort to explosive attacks. Akasaki suppressed his anger and reminded him, "Be careful. Since they have already launched an attack, they definitely won't let it go." "I know." Huaisha looked up and said, "I already saw it." In the rearview mirror, there were suddenly 4 motorcycles speeding over. The riders were wearing motorcycle jackets and black helmets. Behind the black masks, there was malice and ferocity, regardless of the busy downtown. The person at the front took out a pistol from his pocket, aimed at the car, and pulled the trigger. Unfortunately, the car that he borrowed from the old man Shengtenmu was fully bulletproof, so this kind of small-caliber pistol was useless. Immediately after, someone stepped on the gas pedal and sped up. He pulled out an axe from his backpack and slashed at the window next to Huaisha with all his might. Huaisha glanced at him indifferently and retracted his gaze. Then Weno suddenly turned the steering wheel, and the whole heavy car squeezed to the right, directly squeezing the person who rushed up against the wall. Amidst the violent collision and scraping, no trace of him could be seen. The speeding car suddenly shook as if it had run over something. Behind it, the rapidly rolling and spinning motorcycle smashed into the entrance of the tunnel, setting off a ball of fire. However, there were still some fearless attackers who rushed forward. The fastest one raised his hand and took out a heavy object from his backpack. There were suction cups on it. He raised his hand and was about to place it on the car window. But then the car window shattered. The drummer shook and instantly broke the thick bulletproof glass from the inside. Then a hand stretched out from inside like an iron clamp and pinched the wrist holding the bomb. The 5 fingers slowly tightened. With the crisp sound of bones breaking, the attacker let out a tragic scream and struggled with all his might, but his weak wrist could not break free from the clamp. He even began to be dragged away. "Since fate has brought us together, why don't we hitch a ride?" Through the cracked mask, Huaisha looked at the face outside the window that was gradually contorting in fear and smiled. "Weno, speed up." Then Weno grinned and stepped on the accelerator. The car began to speed up. Together with the attacker, there was a hoarse scream in the wind outside the window. The motorcycle under the attacker shook rapidly, unable to keep up with the speed. Finally, it lost control and broke free from the attacker's body. It rolled and hit the wall of the tunnel, exploding, and the heartwarming ride had just begun. Chapter 763. It was a short 4-minute journey, but it felt like 48 hours. At first, there were screams and curses, but later, the pain became unbearable. They fought back with all their might, slashing with their swords, biting with their teeth, and struggling with all their strength, even if they would be crushed under the wheels after they regained their freedom. In the end, the curses turned into hoarse pleading and disappeared. The rag-like thing hanging outside the car window stopped making any sound. It just quietly followed the laws of physics, rubbing against the ground, leaving a red road sign that gradually dried up for the pursuers behind. Unfortunately, after leaving such an eye-catching mark, the active figures on the motorcycles could no longer be seen, until the car slowly stopped in the underground parking lot of Kashiwabara Hospital. The nurses who received the report from the front door rushed over with a stretcher, but they didn't see the expected wounded. All he saw was a wobbly object hanging from the car window. Then his 5 fingers slowly loosened. Throwing the thing on the ground, Huaisha opened the door from the outside and got out of the car. Akaki, who had just arrived, was stunned, looking at the bloody attacker under Huaisha's feet. She asked, "Who is this?" "A friend I met on the road." Huaisha answered and shook the stains on his hands. "We happen to be on the same road, so I gave him a ride. Look, aren't we at the hospital? Quick, send him to the ICU." Lifting his foot and stepping over the wriggling attacker on the ground, Huaisha walked to the operating room under the guidance of his allies. In the private elevator, Huaisher asked Akaki, who had arrived earlier, "What's the specific situation?" "I don't know too much for now. The driver failed to be resuscitated a few minutes ago and passed away." Ignoring the no-smoking rule in the elevator, Akaki smoked a cigarette irritably. "The president was originally fine, but he's old. I don't dare to ask too much about the specific details." At this kind of time, the most important thing for an ally's subordinate to do was to sit down and wait for orders and reports from the higher-ups. Those who asked around were all people with ulterior motives. The fact that he could know so much was already the treatment of a trusted subordinate. As soon as the elevator door opened, she saw Qianyi Renjir leaning against the window and making a call. Qianyi longer turned around and saw Huaisher. He waved at him and said a few words into the phone before hanging up. Then he raised his head and said, "The old man is in the emergency room. I'm afraid his condition is a little troublesome." He opened the window to ventilate the stuffy corridor and disperse the lingering smell of smoke. "He's already over 60 years old." It's already not easy for a half-breed who isn't an ascendant to live this long, and to encounter something like this, it's a bit dangerous this time. Moderate burns were easy to deal with, but complications that had been suppressed with various drugs were difficult to deal with. No one knew when they would wake up from their coma. Qianyi stubbed out her cigarette and asked, "Did anything happen on the way here?" "Have a safe trip and entertain a group of guests," Huaisher replied. "What about the others?" Qianyi shrugged. "That's tough. There's another one who arrived right after you and was just sent to the ICU. I hope you don't mind that he took your guest's bed." This joke had no effect. Neither of them was able to laugh. Qianyi's phone vibrated again, interrupting their interest in continuing their conversation. "Take a seat first." Qianyi patted him on the shoulder. "We'll see how it goes after the surgery." He turned and left. The atmosphere in the corridor was solemn. The backbone of the alliance sat on the benches on both sides. Their expressions were cold and serious. No one could relax to the point of laughing. However, when they saw Huaisher enter, they couldn't help but stand up and bow. Naturally, some people obediently gave up their seats and invited him to take a seat. After a long time of reshuffling his family's business, no one in the alliance dared to look down on him anymore. Even this leader, Huaisher's reputation had become mighty and heroic. Even the guardian Tian Tian, who had a transcendent position in the alliance at the entrance of the operating room, raised his eyes and glanced at Huaisher. He nodded in acknowledgement. He was still wearing the somewhat old Ingzhou robe, accompanied by a sword that never left his body. There were still traces of burn marks on his cuffs. Huaisher bowed respectfully to show his respect. Then he sat down, surrounded by the other team leaders. However, he didn't feel any pride in his heart. On the contrary, it was filled with heavy pressure. It was obvious that the situation was already on the verge of getting out of control. The news of the No Matter Order had just spread and hadn't taken effect yet, but the Kyoto was about to start a full-scale war. They didn't even hesitate to cause a chain car accident in the downtown area, causing major traffic accidents. When the bottom line was broken once, it would become lower and lower in the endless revenge until it finally disappeared without a trace. In the final analysis, talking about the bottom line and morality of the Kyoto was as ridiculous as talking about the risk of entering the market for leaks. Sheng Qianmu had made almost perfect preparations, but what he didn't expect was that the other party would be so crazy as to use a large oil tank to crash in the city. There were probably other explosives and attackers at the scene. The final chain car accident was just a cover-up. As soon as the storm clouds hung in the sky, the rats began to drive their warships to kill each other. Under the manipulation of all parties, the useless scum abandoned by society could be used for their final use. In the silence, his phone suddenly vibrated. He lowered his head to take a look, only to see that it was an unfamiliar number. After being stunned for a moment, Weischer got up and walked through the corridor all the way to the rooftop before answering the phone. "Hello? Who is it? What do you think?" There was an angry voice on the other end. Ever since he became the head of the family, his stinky sister's temper had grown. She looked at everyone as her younger brother, which made Weischer feel more and more helpless. Weischer sighed. "Don't rush me, don't rush me. I'm doing it, I'm doing it. The situation is so sensitive now. Can't we wait until things are a little clearer before dealing with the Iron King gang?" "That's what I wanted to tell you." Hoopa suppressed his irritation and couldn't help but have a headache. After a moment of silence, he said straightforwardly, "Weischer, leave Ingzhou." I've already transferred the money to you. The Yuji treasure that I promised you has already been sent to the Ivory Tower. Forget about the Iron King gang. Just pretend that the deal between us didn't exist." Hoopa said, "This time, the no matter order isn't that simple. Your identity is sensitive, so it's best not to get involved." Weischer was stunned and frowned. "Say more, I like hearing this." "Don't you realize that the timing of the no matter order isn't right?" Hoopa sighed softly. "I can see it now. High Emperor wants to use this consumption tax reform to decide the victor between him and the general before the 5 permanent members of the Command Bureau begins. He wants to avoid the influence of the Central American lineage in the upcoming War of Worlds to the greatest extent. If things go wrong, the streets of the capital will probably return to how they were during the Fall Curtain. There will be people everywhere, and no one will be able to stay safe." "Then what about the inner circle of Donbois?" Weischer asked. "Of course they'll be sacrificed." Hoopa sighed. "Do you think that a group of illegal immigrants can have any proper status? There are many people who want to take this opportunity to clean up the capital." In the silence, Weischer's eyes widened in disbelief. He couldn't understand. "What does this count for?" Weischer suppressed his anger. "What does this count for? A decision that involves an entire country is decided by the results of a group of extreme Tao cultivators. In the end, they still have to use the corpses of a group of innocent people as decoration. Don't you think that's funny?" "Weischer, don't forget, this is Ingzhou. Not every country can be like Dongsha," Hoopa said. When internal sovereignty has already been divided to such an extent, it's already the result of everyone's efforts to restrain themselves that it hasn't become 2 countries like Xinhua. Weischer sneered. "Are you really not afraid that the lowly people in your eyes will be driven to desperation?" In the silence, Hoopa's tone became complicated. "Isn't there still an astronomy meeting?" For the first time, Weischer had the urge to crush his phone. On the other end, Hoopa was also silent. After a long time, she sighed faintly. "Forget it. I knew you would be like this. It's useless to say anything." She was silent for a moment, then suddenly said, "The Iron King gang might attack the inner circle of Donbois tonight. Sheng Tianmu caused Dajing Guangzhou to be so humiliated. He won't let go of this opportunity. When Sheng Tianmu was attacked in the morning, he immediately took a set of border relics from the looming Hall's channel." "I know, thank you. I owe you." Without waiting for Weischer to speak again, she hung up the phone first. In the midst of the busy tone, Weischer heard hurried footsteps coming from behind the door, and the first good news of the day. "Mr. Weischer, the president is awake." In the ward, the atmosphere was solemn. Only Sheng Tianmu, whose left arm was still wrapped in bandages, was drinking water with a smile as if the person who had narrowly escaped death was not him. What's wrong? You look so worried. He put down the glass of water. Am I not fine? It's just a broken arm, a trivial burn. It's not like I lost my life. Why are you so worried? He waved his hand casually and laughed softly. However, this time, it's literally a fire burning at our doorstep. It seems that some people don't want us to be at peace. Huaisher, who had just walked in, did not waste time and said bluntly, "Tonight, the Iron King gang may launch an attack." As soon as the words came out, the atmosphere in the room suddenly stagnated, and everyone's face became ugly. No matter who it was, they would not be happy to be treated as a soft persimmon, let alone this group of extreme Tao who hung their heads on their waistbands. Only Sheng Tianmu was still calm. He nodded slightly and suddenly laughed. "Then, Mr. Huaisher, can you share my worries?" "It's just a small matter." Huaisher said, "It's not a problem." In the bone burial sanctuary, the crows that had been silent for a long time let out excited cries, and a cruel light burst out from their scarlet eyes. You're tuning into the Mystic Fist YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.